Good evening. Looks like I'm live by myself at the beginning of the show again this week. Paulo said he'd be here at the beginning of the show, so I don't know what happened to him. Caught in traffic. We'll have to see. What do I have to say this week? Good question. I got 6 comics at my comic shop. I showed those off on my weekly video. If you haven't seen that, you can go back and look at that. Otherwise, I'll be going over them tonight too, of course. But the weird thing about the comic shop this week is once again, comics didn't get shipped to my comic shop. And I've said it before. I get an email from my comic shop each week telling me what's in that week. And usually and that actually gets sent out before the books are in. So usually if a book's shorted, it shows up on my email, but then it doesn't show up in the shop. That's normal. That's no assholes tonight yet. Paulo was supposed to be here at the beginning of the show. I don't know what happened to him. Haven't heard from anyone else. We'll just see. People have just been popping by lately. But this week in my comic shop, there was only... I got my weekly email, and the only thing on it was Usagi Yojimbo. And I was like, well, that's weird. Only one comic? And last week, there was only one comic. And I noticed there was... I'll probably get them when they come in next week. But there were 4 comics. Ice Cream Man, Shaolin Cowboy, The Silver Coin, and Grimm that I was supposed to get this week. I know because I saw other people on YouTube get them. And they just didn't come into my shop. I'm like, what has been going on with comic book distribution lately? There's Paulo. Let's get him on. Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you doing this week?
I need a vacation, but I also need whiskey. I don't have vacation, but I do have whiskey.
Okay. I was just commenting on, I don't know what's going on with comic book distribution at my shop this week. I got my email, and the only thing on it was Usagi Yojimbo. So I was like, I only got one comic. And usually, like I said, the email comes before the comics get into the shop. Mm-hmm. So usually if a book is shorted, it shows up on the email, and it's just not in the shop that week. Got to wait another week or two till the distributor actually distributes it. This week I noticed last week there were 2 comics, which I got this week, that didn't come in last week, nor were they on my email from my shop. And this week there were 4 comics. Ice Cream Man, Shaolin Cowboy, Silver Coin, and Grimm. And I just noticed that's from 3 publishers too, who all came out this week but weren't in my shop. And I was just like, what the heck's going on? I don't know if it has to do with, because now, Marvel's got their own distributor, DC's got their own distributor, and Diamond. Well, you'd think if Diamond being, the indie distributor now would get the comics in, but I don't know what's going on.
Somebody's got to pay to distribute 80% of the comics, and it's not the indies.
Yeah. That's just like, have they given up? What I don't know what's going on, but it's like 4 comics that should have been in my shop this week weren't. What do you mean? I just find that weird. I don't know. I'll have to ask them next week.
The thing, people are complaining it was easier when there was only one distributor, and we're talking about, and most people who say that, they don't remember being more than one distributor.
Right.
The problem is that having more than one distributor today doesn't solve the problem that used to be Monopoly Diamond having a monopoly. Yeah. Now, because everyone still has exclusive distribution deals.
Diamond is too elite for my shop. Could be. But like I said, the reason I know these 4 are out is, and I actually wrote them down as I saw them pop up on other people's videos or heard them mentioned, because I was like, there's another one I didn't get. There's another one I did. I'm like, what's going on? Because like I said, they came out this week. How come my shop didn't get them in? It's very strange. Not sure. Like, not only didn't get them in, they weren't on my email that the shop sends me. That meant they should have been in. Weird, man. Weird. Comic book distribution. Yeah. Right, pal. There's still no competition, but there's 3 with no competition. It's like, what?
Right. The thing is, you have to say, man, do I go with Marvels? Do I go with DC? Do I go with the others? Do I have to go with any of them?
Good evening. Yeah. And I can still remember, let's see, my shops are all screwed up too. Yeah. Yeah. It's
And
strange.
the funny thing is, because Marvels and DC's distributors don't want to deal with the foreign market, Diamond still distributes them outside North America.
I didn't realize that. Like, and I could also remember back in the 80s when there were a few, 5 or 6 distributors. I forget who the big one. Like Capital was one of the big ones.
Yeah.
Diamond, I think, grew. I'm not sure if the Heroes World was an East Coast distributor, and there was a few others. But like, I think Pacific Comics started out as a distributor.
Yeah.
But I can still remember my comic shop, like in the 80s, also had a hookup with the newsstand distributor. So if like things got, if worse came to worse, they could maybe get something a couple weeks later from the newsstand distributor if they needed it. That was always their backup. Even I don't think anyone's backup is the newsstand distributor anymore.
Well, there's no newsstand distributor anymore.
Yeah.
I think only. There was a time when Marvel was trying to put some stuff out in the newsstand, and they used Archie as a distributor. Because they're the last ones.
That's right. And didn't DC? It wasn't DC using like Walmart.
Yeah, DC was using Walmart. I think that was an exclusive because they could send directly to Walmart, but
that was a really small number of books too. I remember.
Yeah, those were those magazines that they made specifically for the newsstand market. They reprinted some stuff, but then they had one original story, and the newsstands and the comic shops were annoyed because there was one DC story that was not sold in the comic shops.
I think they were selling it in the comic shops like 3 months later.
Yeah. So the guys from the comic shops all went to the Walmarts and picked all of them up.
Yep.
Which of course kind of defeats the purpose of having comics in the newsstand.
And there weren't
it's not for you.
And there weren't even. It's like It's not like Walmart was even. I remember doing the math on it. I don't know where I got the numbers from at the time, but I remember doing the math on it, and I think Walmart was only distributing something around 15 to 20,000 copies at best. And like, that seems like a really small number for Walmart to be moving a comic. You would think if you got to deal with Walmart, since they're so big and there's so many of them, you'd be moving at least 50,000 copies. But it was nowhere near that.
Right. There's no point in there's really no point in Walmart carrying them if they can't sell that.
Yes, weirdly here, Diamond always screws over the largest shop. Well, my tiny shop does fine. That's strange. Yeah, I don't. Sometimes I just don't send it's like I still haven't got that that Savage Dragon comic that came out, I don't know, a few weeks ago, that was done by like Savage Dragon fans. It was just a one-shot Savage Dragon thing, and I ordered it, and they shorted my shop on it, and they've never sent another copy. It's just like, oh, okay. That's just doesn't seem like a good way to run a company, is when you don't get the stuff to the customers. That is odd. But here's one of the books that came out last week. And I got it this week. It's the very last issue. This is Volume 3, Issue 6 of Craig Russell adapting Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology book.
Right, so, with the end of the Ragnarok.
Right, we get Ragnarok here, and the last 2 issues of story, and through most of the series, Craig Russell has been doing layouts, and other artists have been drawing over his layouts. And in this one, he's doing the art, the drawing, and the penciling. So it's really nice to see him doing some stuff. And Craig Russell is just one of those guys who can do no wrong in my eyes. His He just gets everything right. He's just so good. Can't wait to read it. It's on the top of tonight's reading pile. Oh yeah, it's good stuff. I've really enjoyed this. Like I'm not a Neil Gaiman fan, but I love Craig Russell's adaptations. And I also don't think Neil Gaiman's a bad writer. He just usually doesn't write stuff that I'm interested in.
Sure. Now, the Neil Gaiman actually is a lot better writer than people who are afraid of trying and would think. Yeah, because people are trying think he's may think he's too brainy for me, but that's not true. If there's one thing that Neil Gaiman knows better than you, he will introduce that information to you in a way that it's actually appears in a very human setting.
Yeah, I break writers down into a few categories, and writers I don't like, I break down into like a couple of categories. And one of them, Neil Gaiman's in, is somebody I think is a good writer. I'm just not interested in his whatever subject matter or whatever generally.
Sure, but if you like reading stories about people, that's what Neil Gaiman does. Ultimately, the setting will be unimportant because all of the characters will sound like real people.
He writes a lot of stuff about gods and angels and all sorts of stuff like that. That's generally the stuff I don't. But
but they all act like people. And if you go back to Sandman, why do people like Morpheus and Death? He makes them sound like real people. The same thing happens in American
people,
but they do, and you find that in American Gods, and you find that in Neverwhere.
I have to disagree with you because one of the reasons, well, to me, I'm not saying they don't sound like. If they sound like real people to you, they do. But like I said, one of the things I've never liked that Neil Gaiman does is making living embodiments of things. That I said before, because to me that's a shortcut to them being real people. Like we all come with our preconceptions of death into that character because we've seen 1,000 death characters. I'm not saying he did it wrong or badly. That just doesn't interest me. That's all it is. So they may seem like real people to you, but I can't get into them enough to see them as real people.
Yeah,
but like I think he's a good, as opposed to someone like Brian Michael Bendis, who I wonder why he's so popular. I'm like, I read his stuff and I go, people think he's a good writer. So that's like
I know why Bendis. Well, I know why people think Bendis is a good writer, and I know exactly where he failed using the same tools that made people think he was a good wwriter.
Russell makes better pacing than Gaiman. Yeah, Russell's just a master.
Yeah. Sure. What Bendis as a good voice for crime tropes.
Yeah.
And he's obviously a fan of Quentin Tarantino.
Okay.
And people think that Tarantino's dialogues are the reason why they like Pulp Fiction. So when he tries to, at first it sounded different, and that's why people if you read his graphic novels, it was the crime theme and looked like
I tried to read some Powers, couldn't get into it.
Yeah, but then when it starts doing the superheroes, at first it sounds new because you're not used to seeing it in superhero comics.
Okay,
but and in Ultimate Spider-Man, it's kind of disguised because it's just one character in the main character in the supporting cast. When he starts writing a team because they put him on the Avengers, big mistake. Because now you have a bunch of main characters, and they're all supers, and they all need their moments to shine, and they all sound alike.
Yeah, that was the problem. I can remember reading an issue of Ultimate X-Men, and it didn't matter who was talking; they all sounded the same. It was all about his writing and kind of not the character, which is weird too. Because I find has he been doing anything lately?
Last time I think he was in Justice League.
I think he's one of those. Oh, that's right. He went over to DC, got a big deal to do Superman, and then just kind of failed at it. Or the comic failed. I don't want to say he failed. But.
Yeah, and then he did that terrible modernization of the Legion of Superheroes.
He kind of lost his mojo. That's right. All my new comics stick to me because of the human heat wave here. How's everyone doing with the weather? Paint and ink and stuff isn't drying out all right. It's only 81 out and 82 inside right now, but it was up in the 90s Fahrenheit this week, pretty hot, but it gets that way every July here. So,
Well, let's say that if I had the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man running around, we wouldn't need proton packs because it would just melt.
That's when you've got to when you're in the comic shop, you've got to hold your comic with 5 fingertips and not a palm. If you've got a pile of comics, you try to hold them with your fingertips and put them down on the counters when you can.
It's just that dry here.
Yeah. 54% humidity out. Not too bad. I got my little weather station down there, inside and outside.
Yeah, our forest fires are crossing borders.
Wow.
From Portugal to Spain and back again.
Speaking of forest fires, I've got a comic, which might be the first thing by Scott Snyder where I was impressed by the writing. Dark Spaces, Wildfire. I was also impressed by this cover. That's kind of what made me. And at first I thought it was going to be about smoke jumpers, who are the guys who parachute into forest fires. But it turns out, and the art is quite nice too.
Too much purple. What is it with purple?
Scene. I don't think there's nearly enough. There's not. Well, there's some purple. Yeah, there's a lot of purple on this page. Do you not like purple like Scott doesn't like yellow?
Yeah, purple.
I'm okay with all the colors.
There's a lot of colorists doing purple nowadays for no reason whatsoever.
This is written by Scott Snyder. The artist is Hayden Sherman. The colorist is Rhonda Pattison. The letterer is World Design. And it turns out I liked the first. Like you said, I've read some Scott Snyder. I think I buy that. What book is it that he writes? Nocterra? I've been buying Nocterra, and it's been okay, but it really hasn't. The writing hasn't impressed me on it. Our heat wave is expected in a few days. Yeah. 78 F here today. Nice breeze. Not bad. As long as the purple isn't brown, Sleepy's happy with it. But it turns out this is about a... this issue wasn't, but it looks like it's going to be a heist book. Purple is gaining in popularity lately. Sleepy's he keeps close track of those colorists.
Yeah.
But this takes place in California. I think it was Central or Northern California, where there's a program for convicts where, because there's so many forest fires, that if you can get on a forest fire team of, you get out of jail for however long it takes you to fight that forest fire. So, good evening, Tylox the Mighty. So this woman here, and it's funny. I was like, if you look on this little pack here, it says candy. And I was like, does she have candy cigarettes? And that's one of the little things here. She gives candy cigarettes to the convicts to get them. Sugar and water is what they need because they're always overheated. So we get the story of it's told from the point of view of the guard. She's a member of the fire team. Then I think there's 4 women on the fire team, so it's an all female cast. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, there's four women on the fire team. And this whole first issue is almost all introduction. It gives you their story, who each one of them was. Then, kind of in the middle of the issue, the one woman convict is like, "Hey, you know where we are? We're like 2 miles from this really rich guy's house I know." He's like, and because she was in there, she's in there for being like the Bernie Madoff of whatever year this would take place. Okay, she ripped off $68 million supposedly, but but she got like the longest white collar sentence ever. So she's in there for the rest of her life. But she knows her boss was shady and has a house full of shady valuables that he's got up there in case of emergency. And there's also other the main character, the guard, overhears them talking about this. She's like, I don't even want to hear it. I don't even want to hear it. But by the end of the issue, she's like, all right, we're going to rip. They go to approach her about some sort of scheme to rip off the house. And she's like, okay, how are we going to rip off this house? So that's the, but of course the very first page is that house with 5 dead bodies in it. And we got 5 main characters. So things go wrong. But it was really, I must say, I've never seen this artist before. I was Hayden Sherman. I was impressed by the art. I was impressed by the storytelling. And I was even impressed by the writing, which I don't know if it's a complaint or an observation about like Nocterra was like I had to accept that it was like an indie comic done by a mainstream writer and artist. So there were a lot of sort of mainstream tropes in it. So far, there's none of that, and it was just good. The first issue was just good storytelling, good art, and good writing. And heist stories are one of my favorite genres. So I'm glad I picked this one up. And I didn't realize this is by who was this by? IDW. And they're coming out with a new line of creator-owned sort of different genre stuff. They've got a little originals, I think it's called.
Right.
So these are IDW originals. So I guess they're coming out with new stuff, and like this is one of the first one to, and it's actually creator-owned because I looked here and copyright Scott Snyder and Hayden Sherman. So
when they market something as original in a comic line, they might as well translate it into movie pitch.
Yeah, not superheroes movie pitch, right? Yeah, something along those lines. But and they have a couple others here, like actually the Cavill. Oh, I don't even Trey Cavill. I don't even know what that word is.
True cult.
Was that cult?
True cult.
True cult.
Yes. Remember that.
I'm reading that V as a U. That U is a V.
Well, the remember that the Roman V was also a U.
Right. Marty Tarantella has been flipping burgers for 15 years. He has no kids, no hobbies, no love interest, no life. But what he does have is a plan for the perfect heist. Another heist one. Which accidentally puts him on a collision course with a cult full of violent lunatics. The Burger Lord training video did not prepare him for this. So this is by Scott Brian Wilson, Batman Gotham Knights and Pennyworth, and Liana Kangas, Star Wars Adventures and She Said Destroy. 5 issues of Satanic Panic beginning in August. Well, I like the ad.
Yeah, I think the writers and artists really are going to start advertising themselves with what they did before, just so people know that they're not just starting out. Because names are just not sticking to you.
Because I don't know who and if you're a mainstream person putting out an indie book, I'm the person buying indie books, so you may as well show me you do something. Parachuting to forest fires, what a dangerous combo. That brings me to, I mentioned it during my when I picked this up, when I thought it was about smoke jumpers. There's a book called Young Men in Fire by the same guy who did A River Runs Through It. That's a history of smoke jumpers and an event that changed the whole firefighting world back, I don't know, the 60s or the 70s. I can't remember when. But really good book. I read that one like 20 years ago, and it stuck with me. The description in that book of how dangerous fire is just brilliant. Like how fire kills you and just how freaking dangerous it is. It's like every time I see, like just today, I was watching a movie. I love a good heist yarn. Yes. what was the name of that Sean Martin Bro book? What was it? Thief of Thieves. That was a great heist book. Really enjoyed that one. But I was just watching some horror movie today as I was working, and there was this one scene where the house is on fire around the woman, and she, she's standing there talking with another woman as if the house isn't on fire. And then eventually she has to get out of, go down the stairs, go around and I'm like, nope, she'd be dead. She can't get out of that fire. The superheated air would have killed her long before, not to mention the smoke.
Right. No, yeah, most people don't understand how heat gets transmitted. As long as you have a medium and air is a medium, the heat will get to you. It's like those movie scenes where they skip across a lava pool.
Yeah.
It's lava. The hair around it is 300 degrees Celsius.
Yeah. And one of the things I learned reading Young Men in Fire is our outside is actually pretty resistant to fire compared to our inside. One breath of superheated air and you're dead. It doesn't even matter. Your insides have no defense. Again, your insides are not, like I said, and superheated air is just the air that's around the fire that heats up to 200 degrees or whatever it is. You take one breath of that, you fall down and die.
Yeah, and it's mainly the oxygen. If the oxygen gets superheated, it starts moving around too much and expands.
Crazy.
And your lungs can't handle it.
And smoke. The smoke can kill you before the fire gets to you.
Sure, but that's normal. It's like breathing in front through an exhaust pipe.
Yeah,
you should too much carbon and you're dead because
you
it
fall down and die then too. I was like, I saw she was running through this whole fire. I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. But if you ever want to read a good book about smoke jumpers and fire, Young Men in Fire, I should get that. I lent it to someone and never saw it again, but that's okay. That's why collecting. I used to, because I have so many comics. I couldn't collect books too, so I'd read a book and pass it on to someone. Only like a handful of my absolute favorites did I have. But now that I read book, I love reading. I don't love reading comics digitally. I love reading books digitally. And once you have them, they're there. So you don't have to worry about it disappearing. Books. Oh, and here's an addendum to our Stan Lee discussion last week. I didn't think of this till afterwards. It struck me because our series before we start that, we have guys dropped by choppers or sliding down, but parachuting is way crazy. Yeah, the West is really big. And Young Men in Fire is about how they eventually stopped parachuting into every single, because it used to be in the 50s and 60s here in the US, we fought every fire, no matter how remote. Forest fires, we've now learned that forest fires, serve a function in a healthy environment. So as long as it doesn't threaten, so they dropped off these smoke jumpers in this really obscure, far away area, and I think Montana, and like 9 out of 10 of them died because the fire went bad and jumped. Things happened that weren't supposed to happen, and they were like, and then these, I don't know how 9 out of 10 smoke jumpers died for no reason. There was no reason to fight that fire. So since that kind of changed, and that's what his whole book was about, it was about that incident and how that incident changed firefighting. And there's also a song about it by Richard Shindell called The Cold Missouri Waters, I think it is. I don't know, it's called The Cold Missouri Waters. If I think it took place in Montana, maybe it took place in Missouri. I don't know. But he's got a song about the smoke jumpers. And that's where I learned about the book eventually, because I think he wrote the song because he read the book or something like that. But Stan Lee, we were discussing how much of a long shot it was for Marvel Comics to even happen in the 60s. And one of the things I said was that it's really unusual for a creative person to be running something. That just doesn't happen. And one of the reasons was Marvel got so small, and he blah blah blah. But I didn't realize until after we had that discussion that even after running Marvel and making it as big a success as he had, no one ever hired Stan Lee really to run anything again. If he was hired, it was as a creative. If you hired Stan Lee after after he left, after the 70s, you hired him to create stuff for his name, for his connections. You didn't hire him to turn around your company. You didn't hire him to run your company. So it's like even then he was treated as that's how much of a fluke it was that he was running Marvel. Like it was like, because even with his tremendous success with Marvel, no one was hiring him to run anything.
Right. In the end, it was a casting error that proved to be a bigger error. They should have hired him to run a company because that was what he was actually good at.
Well, I think he was good at creative too, but I mean, like, I don't want to dismiss his creative.
The thing is, if you look at Stan Lee's output throughout the 1950s, you'll find that he saved his best work for Millie the Model. And Millie the Model is not the next great American novel.
Once again, he is not Kirby, or he's not in Kirby and Ditko's league, but he's in the league above most, especially at that time. And he was creative enough, even in his editing and whatever he was doing, to help make Marvel. So that's where I'll give him. I always give him credit for that stuff. And he was really treated as a creative after he left Marvel, because no one was hiring him to be anything but a creative. No one wanted Stan Lee running. He wasn't Steve Jobs leaving a company to run some other big company or stuff like that. So like these guys often, these big company runners often fail right into the next job once you're sort of in that niche.
Yeah, but he failed into that creative job that you mentioned. He wanted to go to Hollywood to be a creative. It did not have what it takes to be a creative in Hollywood.
No, that's everyone said, because in order to be a creative in Hollywood, you don't have to be a creative. Kind of, it's a completely. You don't have to actually create anything.
Right, but that was what he was doing. It was not creating anything, but that was not what he was best doing. It. If he did not have an ego, he might have been, by going to Hollywood, he might have become a good agent.
Yeah. Like from all I've read about Hollywood, and it's funny because I've read from writers in Hollywood too, where I remember it was years ago. It must be 20 years ago now. I was reading some indie comic that was written because when Ike Perlmutter started looking for television writers and Hollywood writers to write comics, all of a sudden it became a real thing for TV writers to want to write comics and be able to write comics. And I think this was an indie comic either. It wasn't a Marvel DC, because the writer wrote the editorial in the beginning of it. And he said he really wanted to go into comics to get a project finished. Said he'd been making his living writing in Hollywood for like 10 or 15 years. And not one of his projects ever came to fruition. He's like, you can make a living in Hollywood writing for TV and movies. I mean, it's like, a matter of fact, many people do it, and never have a TV show or movie made. He's like, it's crazy. And it's really frustrating writing all this stuff that's meant to be made, and it just never gets made. When you write a comic book, it's a lot easier to get it made.
Sure, because nobody can afford to buy scripts that you're not going to sell.
Yeah. So I always found that interesting, an interesting little bit about Hollywood.
Sure. Ultimately, they end up buying things just so that nobody else can have them.
There's that
which is not something that comic book publishers can afford to do. And also, even if you don't if you don't finish a project, you can have a finished project that is not what you envisioned. It's a lot easier to get a comic book published, even at Marvel and DC, and think, yeah, that's just how I saw it.
A lifetime of optioned work. Yeah, Comic Crack's in the film business, so he knows this stuff.
Either seeing, this is how I envision, or even, man, this looks better than I thought, because of course, even though you're working in a visual medium, you may not have
you don't really know how to visualize.
And I think that's what attracted people like Straczynski and Kevin Smith and Bob Gale to comic books, was the notion, my story is going to come out. There are no producer telling you what it should come out as. No director saying, no, we're going to film that way, and no studio notes.
Right. There's one guy you're dealing with, the artist, and you two can really get along.
Even the way the editor talks to the writer, when you're developing a story, you don't have as many roadblocks as you do on TV.
100% correct, Paulo. Comic Crack says.
I think French editors will present more roadblocks than Marvel or DC, and in France you own the copyright. But they're essentially more like book publishers, because the book publishers tell you should put this in, take this out.
A bit of that does go on at Marvel and DC, and it all depends upon what comic you're writing and what plans someone else has for it. So I think it varies at Marvel and DC, and it's usually not the editors; it's somebody above the editors.
Sure, but ultimately, then you get into the monthly grind, and you have a product to put out.
Yes. But like there's stuff like the famous stories about the Spider Clone saga, where they told them, you just got to stretch this out for another 6 months, and they were like, "What?" And I know that I've heard writers complain sometimes where they're like, you think our writing sucks, but you don't know what changes were made not by us. So I know it does happen. I just don't, probably not nearly as often as it does in TV and film.
And it's easier to relay it on personally, and it's easier to put out as a physical product. I really can't imagine you trying to do a story on TV and say, instead of episode 2, that should be episode 8. Or we can't have that for episode 6 because the actor is not feeling the groove.
Even the most famous film director has people talking in his ear that they have to answer to. Very few exceptions. In TV, they rearrange your episodes after they're made, like they famously did in Firefly.
And Firefly is one of those series that comic books fans like. Because Joss Whedon.
I've always loved I love the TV series, but I have no interest in the comic books, kind of. But I've read some of them, and they're okay. The TV series I enjoyed. I watched it first. Matter of fact, speaking of running episodes out of order, I was one of the few people watching Firefly on Friday nights when it first aired. They showed the pilot last. He made a 2-hour pilot, and the story goes, then the studio didn't like it. It wasn't fast moving enough. And they had to make a new first episode, which they had to do quicker than the other episodes too. And I was watching the show, and I thought it was okay. I kind of liked it. Then I finally saw the pilot, which I didn't know was the pilot because we didn't know all this stuff at the time. And I went, "Oh, that explains everything. Why didn't they put this first?" And that was like the last episode they ever ran, was the pilot. And I was just like, "Oh my God, that's so dumb." Because like I said, the pilot set everything up, was a good story, gave you all the relationships. and made you understand all the other episodes a lot better because all the relationships were, laid out in front of you. And it was just like, Fox ran them in the wrong order because that's what they wanted to do. Happy Fridays, fellas. Good evening. Love Firefly. Some of the comics are really good, others really awful. Yeah. Evening, Lefty. And I think one of the mistakes I think the Firefly movie did, and I understand it because they wanted a dramatic movie moment, was one of the things I liked about Firefly is that it was like the only sci-fi story ever with a husband and wife who were actually a sort of happily functioning couple.
Sure.
You just don't ever see that anywhere. And they were both good characters. And in the movie, they killed off the husband.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just kind of that. So now he's not there. So that relationship isn't there. They're not interesting. And she's less interesting now because she's
I won't say she's less. Widow. I won't say she's less interesting. The thing is, if they were expecting the movie to serve as a bookender to the fact that there was no second season, it actually left more questions open than it had. First of all,
there were supposed to be 2 more movies, but even the movie didn't do well enough.
Yeah.
Or at least there was an option for 2.
When you use movies to round out a TV series, it doesn't really work well. It was the same thing with the Stargate movies.
Yeah,
they're just not as good. They look like big episodes, but they're disconnected from the main storyline, and you feel like they don't really matter.
I'm okay with big episodes. That's never been a criticism for me. I've always heard people say, "Oh, that just looks like a big episode of Star Trek or something." I'm like, that's what I want.
If you put them with the rest of the series in the context of the series, and then it goes into reruns, and you rewatch everything all at once, it makes sense within the context of the series. Though those TV movies end up being rerun outside of the context, and they're never satisfying.
Right. I see what you mean there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's a mini that focuses on Zoe and their daughter. I think it handles the character. Yeah, some of the stuff I've read has been okay. I'm just not as interested in it because they changed. Like after the movie, I read some of the stuff after the, and you know, here's a criticism I read about licensed comics once, and I kind of agree with this. If you're a fan of something, let's say Firefly. Mm-hmm. What Firefly TV show specifically, what you really want is more Firefly TV show, but you can't get that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So you've got these licensed Firefly comics, and they're not really what I want. And when I read, and that's always there as I read them. And unless they're exceptional in exceptional some way in as comics, which the odds are they're not going to be. There's always going to be some disappointment that goes with them because they're not what you really want. More of the Firefly TV show, which just doesn't exist.
Yeah, and I imagine the same happens with the Buffy comics and the Smallville comics. Wilson.
Good evening, Wilson.
Good evening, my friends. How are you guys doing?
We're doing all right.
Okay.
We're talking the disappointment of licensed comics right now.
Okay. Very cool. There's one that I had read recently, but go on, please.
Specifically, I once read, I'll repeat this for you, someone's criticism of licensed comics in general, and I kind of agree with this, is we're discussing the Firefly TV show. I'm a fan, let's say you're a fan of the Firefly TV show. What you really want is more of the Firefly TV show. But you can't, that's impossible. You can't get that. So instead, you've got licensed comics, which, unless they're exceptionally well done, there's always a little bit of disappointment that goes with them because they're not really what you want. They're not necessarily bad, but they're always kind of lesser than is the problem. But, there are some good licensed comics out there. I'm sure. Matter of fact, I probably would like licensed comics better of the stuff I'm not a fan of to begin with. Like
Okay.
I just read. Here's a license that popped into my head. Oh, I gotta learn this artist's name because he's really good. But it's called the Warren Ellis James Bond Omnibus. The artist is really good on it too. He's new to me, but he was really good. But and I am a fan of the original Ian Fleming James Bond, but I haven't read them since I was 20.
Right.
But that was a really good comic. So, like I said, there can be good licensed comics, but more and like I said, I can't really call myself a James Bond fan, so I'm not going to have that inherent disappointment, which I think is inherent in if you enjoy like a movie franchise and then read the comic. There's kind of always a little bit of disappointment. I shouldn't say always. There's often a little bit of disappointment, especially if the comic itself isn't A level. Like if the talent on the comic is B level and you're already buying the comic with B level expectations, you're kind of like, all right. See.
I could see that. I could definitely see that. Although licensed comics were the first comics that I read. That's kind of brought me into, because that's the thing. They work in that sense.
Yes, they do.
But again, maybe they were exceptional in the sense of, for me, it was G.I. Joe and Transformers.
They were not exceptional. They were just the first comics you read.
Yeah.
But if you've never read comics before, they're exceptional.
Sure.
Right.
And I've read the Transformers comics after watching the Transformers cartoon, and while neither of them were prize-winning material, the comics never seemed as well made as the cartoons.
Yeah, I was too old for both of them, so.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For me, I found those to be entertaining, and I enjoyed it. Even Star Wars, I enjoyed it. But then again, yes, I'm looking at it with the nostalgia of a 10-year-old.
If you're 10 or 12, it's a whole different ballgame.
Yes,
I'm talking us as grown-ups.
And then later on, yes, I can see where I'm disappointed with comics like Thundercats.
Right.
Where I watched the cartoon, I'm a little older. They put it part of the Star Comics imprint, so it's already those are for kids.
Right. You're not a kid anymore.
Right. So it's like they're not, they're not as entertaining. Then you have something like Shogun Warriors, which is connected to the toy line. That has no real lore to it because all you know of is the toy. So that becomes interesting in itself. And then you have the Marvel Godzilla, which is nothing at all like even the Hanna-Barbera Godzilla. Right. They're completely different animals. And license is odd in that sense.
Yeah.
Like
the early Firefly books, Comic Crack says, at least had the benefit of Joss Whedon still at the helm. I can see that. Like if the original creators, if the creators of the series are involved in the comics, I can imagine that being an advantage.
I know when I read the Buffy comic books, it was like the next season if it wasn't canceled. That's how they sold the concept.
I read those. Those were solid, but a little disappointing. Mm-hmm. I came for the free therapy, Jared. Keep it going. Yeah. Early Buffy the Vampire Slayer was the only licensed stuff I liked. And some early, I've heard other people speak well of the Dark Horse, Alien, Predator stuff.
I have a few Star Trek novels, and they're pretty good. But it's not like you think that. Of course, Star Trek is the point is that Star Trek does not exist to put the characters in danger. So it's really you're really not expecting drama. Right. But the Star Trek New Frontier series ends up being better because since it doesn't follow any specific crew, it's a whole new crew that Peter David created. Half of the characters are new. Others are reinterpretations of background characters which appeared in on both of the TV series. Like number one from the Pike episode, she comes back as a whole new immortal character.
And Jason Masters was the penciler. Dom Reardon must be the colorist. But yeah, I recognize the name now. The Warren Ellis and Jason Masters, 007 Omnibus I recommend. That was really good. And I think you mentioned Star Trek books. I think books are less disappointing than comics because books can go into so much more detail about whatever licensed world. And I think that's what book readers are looking for.
I can see that.
If you're like my friend Rob he used to collect the Star Trek books, but that's what he loved about them. And that's what he loved about other licensed book is that books can go into even more detail than the movie. So that I think if you're reading a licensed book of a movie or something or a TV show, that I think books do a good job with it, better than comics, and also books only depend upon an author. If you get a good, solid author, he doesn't have to be super talented. A B-level author writing, a Star Trek novel, I think Star Trek fans will be interested. B-level talent on a Star Trek comic book, the writers B-level, the pencilers B-level,
which is what you usually get in a Star Trek comic.
Yeah, B-level is being generous. So all of a sudden, and I once, I had back when I was in college, my print production teacher said when you're printing something, you have to get it 100% right, because there's a bunch of hands it's going through, and if you get it 95% right, and he gets it 90% right, and he gets it 95% right, by the time you get to the end of the line, you're at 80% of what you should have had. So you have to get it 100% right. Otherwise, and I think it's that way in comics. You get a B-level writer, a B- artist, B inker, B- letterer, B- cut. By the time you get to the end, you got a C on your book. So I think that's it with some licensed stuff too. Is since it depends on so many people, all those people have to be on their game to make it a B. Well, with a novel, only the author has to be on his game to make it a B.
That's interesting because I have read a lot of the Star Trek novels.
Yeah,
and I've read a lot of the comic books, being a huge Star Trek fan. And yes, the novels for me felt like I was watching a Star Trek episode.
They deliver.
They definitely deliver.
I think they deliver more than comics. As sort of a general idea.
Yes, there are probably a handful of comics that stands out like this was good, but there are more novels. Almost a lot of the novels, I would say, I had immensely enjoyed more so than ever any of the comics. So you could probably pick out a handful of comics, and also it depends on the comics themselves. Like I did enjoy comics that kind of stood outside of the continuity of regular Star Trek. So it wasn't like, these events take place between here and here. And it seems like, that seems like they're trying to push it into that area, but doesn't seem to work. But then there's the ones that were like, Star Trek Unlimited was one of the Marvel ones I enjoyed because those stories could have been taken and put into anywhere. They weren't as strict of when it was happening. And then there's the ones that the early Voyagers were interesting too, because the early Voyages were only based on that one episode from the cage. And then that's it. So there's no continuity to worry about in that aspect. Where something like Star Wars comic books were very interesting, and I found them a lot of fun. But then again, 10 years old, Star Wars was the perfect age for that. But this is before I even read any of the Star Wars novels, which they themselves become a greater fan base too, because that you got more what was canon until it wasn't canon kind of a thing. And I think fans do attach themselves to certain things. Like I attach myself to Star Trek, and I have ebbs and flows of when I'm really into Star Trek, where it's like, okay, This year is a Star Trek year. I'm making models. I'm deep diving into the episodes. I'm watching the movies. I'm
putting on
reading
your
the
Star
novels.
Trek underwear.
Yeah, basically getting into that mindset, and then it kind of goes away, and it's like, okay, now it's Star Wars or Marvel
Okay.
or whatever. So I ebb and flow in certain things, and it's been years since I've actually deep dive into something like that. But I get to now watch and see how in different media these things are. That there's an expectation if you're a huge fan,
Right.
and then you go to see it, and it's like, could this have been better? And everything could have always been better.
Right.
But there's some stuff that, yes, the great disappointment that you're expecting. The one recent one for me in a comic book format. And I'm glad I waited for trade, but at the same time, I probably should have picked up the first issue and just stopped my disappointment right there and then. Was fairly recently, and by recently, I'm an old man, so the last 5-10 years.
I think
Fairly
everything
recently,
within the last 5 years. 15 years ago. I'm like, yeah, 5 years ago.
So there was a Mighty Mouse comic book that came out.
Okay.
And I really like Mighty Mouse. I've read it in different incarnations over the years. There's been so many comic books. Almost everyone had that license at one point or another would get the Mighty Mouse license. So I enjoyed the cartoons, the shorts and stuff like that. The remake cartoon, wasn't my thing. But in comic book format, I did enjoy them because they were treated like most cartoon books. There are little gags here and there, and over the years, that's kind of what I've expected from Funny Animal comic books. And then this one gets put out, and it is from Dynamite Entertainment, which, by the way, I do some work for, so I will still be criticizing them anyway. This comic book comes out. I do not pick up. I pick up the first issue, but I don't read it. It was one of those that got put into the pile. And then I kept missing the issues. And I said, you know what? I'll wait for trade paperback. Trade paperback comes out. I pick it up and I read it. And it was as disappointing as a 90s live action movie based on a cartoon show where they decided to bring the cartoon into real life. No one wants that. When you want to see a Tom and Jerry movie, you want to see Tom and Jerry in their element.
Yeah.
You don't want to see these cartoon characters get pulled into the real world and deal with real world situations. Every time they do that, it's not an entertaining movie or show. So this did the same exact thing. It looks like they must have taken a script because there was, I do recall, there was a movie supposed to be done, a live action CGI Mighty Mouse movie. I saw images for it, and it never went anywhere. So this read felt like someone took that script and made it into a comic book, and just added to the disappointment.
Was it Mighty Mouse drawings, like pasted over photographs?
No, it was in the comic book itself. It was drawn like a comic. It was drawn. But it was drawn in such a way to try to make it look as realistic as possible.
Okay, that's weird.
And then the story was this kid watched the cartoon and somehow pulled the cartoon out because the kid needed help. So his hero came out to help him. So now you have a cartoon mouse in the real world dealing with real world situations where it's like, that has really nothing to... It doesn't tell me the story of Mighty Mouse.
Right.
It tells me this kid who's a fan who wants to draw Mighty Mouse brings the character into the real world, and they're dealing with whatever the real world situation
is strange.
was, which is completely strange and not what a fan wants.
At least not that fan.
At least not this fan. So it was completely a disappointment. The art, I don't even remember the artists. I don't remember the creative team on it at all. It was so forgettable that all I remember was like, this was a waste of money for something that's potentially a fun character. That is like, you get the license to a classic character, and this is what you do with it. It just was such a disappointment that, and usually even with a disappointing comic book, I'll go back and check it out again to see maybe it's just that mood or what
Yeah.
have you, because sometimes you'll change your mood on something.
That's why I
and it's
read
like,
everything twice.
Yeah, so it's like I haven't been back to it since, because to me it was just that it was such a disappointment
Wow.
that there was just to me it was basically like saying, "Hey, well, let's do a Star Wars," but instead of doing a story, what we're going to do is bring those characters to the real world and have them react to how the fans feel about them. Now, granted, that did work for that Star Trek spoof one with Tim Allen.
Oh yeah.
So it worked that way.
It worked as a spoof, as a parody.
Right, it worked as a parody, but this did not have that.
Have you read any of these 90s Star Trek New Generation that Tit Goblin mentioned? Really feel like extra. I remember the book, but I don't think I've actually read any of them.
The DC 90s Star Trek.
I do not.
He said the books or the
comics.
The comics.
Yeah.
Okay, so I did read Next Generation, and the original series was going on with DC. Marvel received the books in 2000.
Did you like them?
I enjoyed them for what they were.
Okay.
Like, they had some good stories. The annuals were pretty good. The thing with it is, like, the other problem is knowing background stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that those books had problems with art because each of those actors approved their likenesses. So there was always art going back and forth. And so the books looked really stiff because the artist was just redrawing the photos because they didn't want to go back and forth. Mm-hmm. So they were better at Marvel because Marvel was not restricted in the art style as much as DC was.
Right.
But again, not everybody knows that.
Right.
So for me, being that I know
you
the background
noticed that
stuff,
looking at it, you're like, oh, this could have been better.
Right. It's like the artwork was really stiff. The stories were interesting. But again, everything was kind of boring too because there's no real stakes. Because like a Star Trek TV show, you couldn't really change much going on there. By the end of the episode,
exploring new worlds, you'd think it'd be okay, but who knows?
And again, it's one of those things.
The John Byrne, I think, did the first 2 issues. Mine, the comic says Indiana Jones comics were pretty cool, but Simonson and Byrne were top players. I don't even remember Simonson being on it. I mean, I remember Byrne doing the first 2 issues, or maybe just the first issue. I can't remember.
Walt might have been writing them.
No, he left.
Michelini was writing them.
Oh, okay. So
then he left, and I left too, because the next artist wasn't really nearly as dynamic as John Byrne was.
The next artist was Gene Day.
No, yeah, I was a big Gene Day fan. I don't know why I wouldn't have picked that up, but maybe it was...
David and Mazzucchelli did a couple of issues, but that was before Mazzucchelli became Mazzucchelli.
Yeah, I was long gone by then. I only stuck around as long as Byrne, which was like 1 or 2 issues.
Yeah.
I remember being very disappointed.
I recall enjoying the Dark Horse versions of the Indiana Jones.
I never read those.
Those I enjoyed.
I think I've mentioned this before. There's a difference between doing an Indiana Jones adaptation and a Star Trek adaptation. If the original setting is in a pulp tradition, it's easier to do stories about the characters, even if you know that they're not in any real danger, depending on where they are in the chronology. Simply because you don't the hero's journey needs you to go from point A to point B in order for it to be a complete story. The pulp tradition has the story being a day in the life of the character. You don't go through there's no need for an origin story. And even if you know that the character lives at the end, it's like they're telling you about something that felt dangerous to them at the time. So you feel going through that danger, even if you know that they don't die.
Yeah, he doesn't need a dramatic change from the beginning to the end of the book.
Right, does not. It'll help you learn more about the character. One of the things that just popped into my head while we were talking about this is that I think the reason why the Dark Horse books, or at least in the Star Wars, were better is because the Star Wars books for Dark Horse the comics were based on written books. So
they were actually in continuity.
They were in continuity, and they were based on written books. So everything is there for the artist. So the Splinters of the Mind's Eye was a very good comic book because it was based on a good novel. I do not know if Indiana Jones fell into that as well for Dark Horse, but maybe it's why that was to me, a better read than the previous ones.
I've always wanted to get a copy of Jack Kirby's 2001: A Space Odyssey. I have digital scans of it from the internet, but I've never actually seen it in real life. So that's one I've always wanted to get, just because from what I've read I can't even remember if I read through the whole thing or started it and then said I want to see this for real someday. But it's as far out there as the movie. It's weird, strange stuff. Have you guys ever read Kirby's 2001?
Sure, I got skins. The thing. Yeah,
I don't think I've ever actually read it. Now that I'm thinking about it, I have not.
And there was I think the Treasury edition was supposed to be the movie, and then there was a series.
Right. The series. The thing, since it's Kirby doing it, it goes through the type of ideas that were running through Kirby's mind at the time. Right. So you get some of the stuff that you'd recognize from the Eternals and from the Fourth World, which is more Kirby than it was the Arthur C. Clarke.
Yep. I remember it being very Kirby and not Arthur C. Clarke at all. I have to find something in this book. Oh, there we go. As a production guy, Wilson isn't going to like this. Let me show you what happened. I got Death Dealer number 3. And look at this page. The balloons floated off the borders.
Uh-huh.
There, and there.
All right. That was a size change. Because they're not all equal off the border. So it wasn't a shift in the plate. There was a change in the size of something.
I don't know how that gets by you. That's like the worst thing to happen when you're doing the production on a book. You do not want the balloons to move. And that normally they don't. I mean, that's one is up. Well, you're right. That's a size change. You know what it is? Let's look here. Yep. You're 100% right there.
I've made that mistake.
If you look at what they did was, I just lost the page. Hold on. Now I'm boring you, thumbing through a book that you can't even see because I've lost the page. Isn't that good? Isn't that compelling?
You're going to now need to put an overhead camera for books.
If you look at the top of this page here, where this border is, and the top of that page there, what they did was they wanted to get the top of her head in, and they were afraid his head was going to trim off, so they shrunk this page. This page right here, this one over here, pardon me, they shrunk because you can see that it's where the borders are in a little bit from all the other pages. So you're right. They shrunk this page probably because they didn't want her head to trim.
Mm-hmm.
That was a bad idea.
That's probably working right up to the end. No time to change it. No time to send it back to somebody in production. Maybe that was made at the printers. Yeah. But somebody made that choice and approved it.
You'd think that someone would notice it in the digital proof, but I guess they didn't. But this is Death Dealer number 3. which if it wasn't, I'm still torn. I've now bought 3 issues of it, but I'm still torn as to whether to put it on my
Pull list.
pull list or not, because it's a $5 book. And why am I paying an extra dollar for? If it was a $4 book, it would be on my pull list. It's a $5 book. I don't know how I justify it being on my pull list, because it's not worth an extra dollar compared to my other $4 books.
Right.
So it's just kind of like, do I want? But nice artwork. The story's kind of cool. Sword and sorcery stuff. I really like the artist on this. What's his name? Stefano Martino with Luis Antonio Delgado on colors. Jacob Baskell on letters, and the story is Mitch Iverson. But it's like all 3 issues I've gotten the last month just on slow weeks. Since my Wilson wasn't here for my confusion at the beginning, there was 4 comic books that were supposed to come into my comic shop this week that just didn't. So I was left with only 3 comics on my pull list. 2 that were supposed to be in last week. It was like, I don't know what's going on with distribution to my comic shop, but it sold extra copies of Death Dealer because I had nothing else to buy. But I'm kind of like, do I really want? I think I'm going to have to put it on my pull list just so I don't have to think about whether to put it on my pull list. It's worth $1 a month to not have to think about. Do I want to pay $5 for it? I do that sometimes when I'm buying something big and expensive. Expensive for me, $100, $200, before I spend like $100 or $200 on something. Or even something more like a new computer, let's say, with a couple $1,000. I always like research it, figure out what I want to got, watch it for a while, see prices go up and down. And if I haven't bought it by the point where I'm spending too much time wondering if I should buy it, then I just buy. I'm like, I've spent too much time thinking about buying this thing. I'm going to just buy it. Which is why I got this. Where is it? I think I mentioned this this Tour Box Neo, which is the thing with the buttons and the knobs and the wheels on it. I just got this last week. This week, I think it was. So that was one thing I've been wanting to get. It cost me like $125. So after a year of me going, should I spend the money on this? Should I get that? I finally, all right, it was on sale during Prime Day on Amazon, so I got it.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. I've done the same thing with certain action figures where it's like, what is it do I want to collect? But I know what I want to pay. And it's like, I know how much they retailed for, but at the same time, I go really deep into it because it's like, I also know how much it costs to ship out an item. And when I look at it and I see the price of shipping, it's like, there's no way. There's no way. That costs $3.95 to ship. Why do you have $11.95 on there? I know you want to pocket extra money. So it's like, I'll find it somewhere else and I'll do the weight type of thing. But, and like I said, I've done that with electronics where I want to make sure that every time I've bought my computer, I want to buy it and really use it for the next few years and not worry about having to upgrade it or do anything to it. Once I get it, I just want to plug it in and just get to work.
At some point, you say to yourself, "All right, enough thinking about it."
Yes.
I've thought there's no more I can think about it.
Yep.
Does Death Dealer have extra pages? No. But I think it's 20 pages or something. But what it does have that I like is a cover gallery. So all of the alternate covers, all of the are printed in the back. 1, 2, 3, 4. Like, I like that. That's a fun Thor piggyback cover. And you get a Frank Frazetta cover. So there's always 4 covers in the back. Well, at least I think it's 20 pages. Let's see.
You're paying for the gallery and not house ads, which is good.
Yeah. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, maybe there are 11, 12. So it's a 24 page. So I guess that's extra from Marvel and DC. It's a 24-page book. And it's got, I really like the art. It's got nudity in it on occasion, which is always good in a barbarian story. And it's got, I just flipped by a hunky. It's got nice hunky barbarians, for the ladies. And the guys who like their barbarians hunky, Oh, I've got a tickle in my throat. That's where alcohol saves you time. You just buy things quicker. That is true. Though I'm not a drinker, but I've seen others do it. But like I said, I just decided I'm going to put Death Dealer on my pull list. Enough thinking about it.
There you go. It was worth that $1.
It was worth it. It's worth that $1 not to think about it again. And speaking of, I just got a notifier from my comicshop.com, which I have a wish list on my comicshop.com. It's really there just for, I make an order once or twice a year at my comic shop. And it's really there for that, where, I just did it a couple months ago. I filled in my Journey, The Adventures of Wolverine McAllister collection. I bought like 10 issues, like $2 an issue or something. That extra $1 is a tip to the Frazetta family. Yeah, there you go. But there's one comic I put on there. It was a heavy metal comic called Tarna something. Tarna, Tarna, and there was a subtitle after it. But I think it came out last year. I think she's the woman from the movie on like flying on the thing with whatever. But I bought the miniseries last year, except I didn't get issue 2. Issue 2 never came into the shop. Issue 2, he tried reordering it, that never sent it. And I think a lot of people didn't get issue 2 because I've got issue 2 on my watch list, on my wish list for mycomicshop.com. And it comes in maybe once every few months. I get a notification that says, oh, there's Tarna issue 2 is in. And it sells out in a minute. In a minute. That happened this week. I was like, oh, Tarna issue 2. I'm like, I'm not putting an order in now. Later on that evening, it wasn't there. And then I just got another notification, or someone must be buying these up too, or something, that they got it in again, except this time a CGC 9.8 Tarna number 2 for $75 or $89 or something. I was like, no, thank you.
Yeah, you finally have the issue. You just can't read it.
Yeah. To crack it, I have to pay plenty of money for it. But it's just funny. I don't know what it is with that issue, but they must have not shipped it. Mm-hmm.
I have not bought any comic books this week, but I did get to read some of the books that I bought last week. Which,
what did you read?
I got to read the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Last Ronin series, and I quite enjoyed it. I read it. What I would do is I would read it at night before I go to bed. I read a chapter or two, let me sit with it and go ahead. No big surprises in a story that takes place in the future, kind of a thing. There are a lot of, he always had the influences of Frank Miller anyway. So I had a Dark Knight Returns, grim, gritty future kind of a thing. What I did like is that Kevin Eastman did some artwork in it. They were like flashbacks to certain parts of the story. So he did the drawing of the flashback. So you get that Ninja Turtles look of the comics from the 80s because of that. The book was sold to me different than what I got in the story.
Yeah.
And what I mean in the sense of like, I thought there was a bigger mystery involved. And
the only mystery was which turtle was still alive.
Right. I thought that was going to be a mystery through the whole series. Yeah. And it's not. You're told in the first issue.
Yeah.
So
that was keep in mind that I think that was the reveal at the end of issue 1. So that's that was their hook, I think, for getting people to buy.
Right. I was under the impression that the whole series you weren't going
Was
to
a
know,
mystery.
so you would need to as you're reading it, you figure out these things, and then as
Okay, I
each
see.
one is told how that one passes, like, all right, so we know it's not this one. And again, it was my own assumption from the
Right.
advertisement. Plus, I purposely did not go looking for any information
Right.
because I didn't want to know anything that might have ruined it for me. And again, when the trade paperback came out, someone did fan art, and basically it got kind of ruined there.
Yeah.
Which it wasn't surprising in my mind. It's like it's probably going to be such a turtle, and it was.
Yeah.
But to me, it was like it was a good read. It was a lot of fun.
I enjoyed it too.
I
Not being a
enjoyed-
turtle fan, I enjoyed it as I bought it issue to issue.
And being a turtle fan, I enjoyed it a lot because I've watched many of the different incarnations of the turtles,
Right.
and they incorporated a little bit of everything. So similar to the Savage Dragon, if there was a point of history that you enjoyed these characters, something in this book was part of that to me. So yeah, I enjoyed it immensely. My brother gave it a read. He enjoyed it. So I can't wait to actually reread that one because now I can read it without the anxiety of what's going to happen next. Now I can really look at it and enjoy the artwork too as I'm going through it.
I bought Death Dealer 1 because I was blinded with how attractive Rosetta's granddaughter is that took over the estate and was promoting it. I didn't buy issue 2 because I came to my senses. I actually bought issue 2 first. That was my first issue. Like I said, it's a solid comic. I enjoy it. But when you're saying you're talking about your disappointment, that just reminds me of how I was making a comment on my haul video this week to one of my regulars. I forget which one now. But he was talking about how he's been disappointed with Usagi Yojimbo lately because they introduced a new character in Usagi Yojimbo, who's another swordsman who's Usagi's younger cousin. And he says he just doesn't find Usagi palling around with him interesting. He prefers when Usagi used to pal around with some of the more interesting characters. And I said, especially with Usagi Yojimbo, I came to the conclusion it was sometime in the late 90s to try to not let my expectations get in the way of me and try not to get what I think something should be about to get in my way of what it's actually about. Because in the night, and it was Usagi Yojimbo who made me think this way, because Usagi Yojimbo has been on my pull list from the beginning. But there were some years in the 90s I took it for granted, and for some reason I wouldn't read it I'd have the issues because it was on my pull list, but 3, 4, 5 issues might build up. Because I'm always like, I really don't want to read that one. I got other comics to read, and I know what that one is, kind of thing in my mind. But then I'd sit down and read them, and I'd love them. I'd be like, why did I not want to read these? Why did I? But it was like my own idea of what it was stopping me from enjoying it. So at one point I just went, you know what? I gotta stop letting it, because especially since I buy things from creators who have been on books for years. I buy all the Brubaker and Phillips stuff. I buy all the Terry Moore stuff. Some projects I might like better than others, but I can't look for excuses to not like something, because that happens. I find sometimes when you buy things long term, you start to look for excuses. That's not as good as it was. I don't like that as much. And it's really in my head, not in the book. Every time I'd read Usagi, I'd be like, this is brilliant. These issues are as brilliant as ever. They're not same old. They're not bland. But in my head, they were, just because I've been buying it for so long. It was familiar. It wasn't new and exciting. It was exciting when I read it. So it's like it's weird how like my own like you said, your own expectations of something can get in your way of enjoying it. And ever since then, I said, you know what, I'm going to try as best as I can not to let my own expectations for something get in the way of my enjoying it. So now every time I buy a new Brubaker and Phillips book, I just let it wash over me. I don't expect what I got in the last book from them, because it's a new series. They're doing something new and different. So that's a weird thing. Listening, I've purposefully tried not to let my expectations ruin things for me, which isn't easy.
No, it's definitely not easy. It's one of the reasons why my brother will not watch a movie trailer.
Yeah.
People do say that there's too much.
I watch only the trailers. They're much better than the movies, and they're over real quick.
Oh yeah, completely over. But sometimes you'll also get a different narrative than what you get in the movie.
Completely.
Or even with the Marvel ones, where you'll get scenes that never appear in the movie.
Sometimes you'll get the whole movie in a trailer. Sometimes you'll get what you think is the whole movie in the trailer, and you find out it's the first 3 minutes. And it's like trailers can be wildly all over the place.
Completely wild. So I try to end up watching the first trailer, and then that's it. I don't try to watch any of the TV spots or anything extra after that, because again, it is fun to speculate and stuff like that. Could this mean this? Could this mean that? But again, sometimes you'll build up something in your mind, and it's like this is not what the trailer sold me on. So it's really hard. And the same thing was like I stopped listening to movie critics, a long time ago. When I was a kid, I knew I can't listen to critics. They bashed Indiana Jones, saying that it was boring. And it was like, that was one of my favorite movies. Then again, I was a kid. So it's like, I'm not going to listen to this old guy. He doesn't make any sense,
By the way,
so that was the new issue?
New issue I also got of Usagi. That's his cousin there. I like his cousin. I actually do. I like Usagi having someone new and slightly younger to talk to.
Right.
He's not necessarily an interesting character, but he fills a role that Usagi has never had in his book. So that's why I like it. It's kind of a new thing to me. He's usually a lone wanderer who sometimes meets up with people and has little adventures and they're gone. He's actually family. We've never had Usagi Yojimbo in family before.
And I would suspect the person that dislikes the new character is a person who grew up with the whole concept of Cousin Oliver just showing up out of nowhere. And for those who don't know, is that occasionally when a TV show is winding down, they'll bring in a new character to pump in new life. And it's usually not that great of a character. What was it in Simpsons? Poochie was the joke that they did.
Poochie, that's right.
For that.
By the way, here's some house ads for more of those IDW originals. There's True Cult again, Dead Seas by Cavan Scott and Nick Brockenshire. Golgotha Motor Mountain by Matthew Ehrman, Lonnie Nadler, and Ryan Lee. I have no idea who these people are. Earth Divers by Stephen Graham Jones and David Gianfelice. Crashing by Matthew Klein and Morgan Beam. They all have pretty nice covers.
That's pronounced Gianfelice.
Yeah, I knew I was off on that one. I knew there was no way I was getting that right.
I am here to teach you how to pronounce the names of European artists.
Yep.
I like that cover to Earth Divers.
Yeah, they're all pretty nice covers. That was Mike Mignola-ish, that Dead Seas. And there's the True Cult in the Dark. But yeah, I guess maybe they have some good new stuff. Some good new stuff coming out from IDW, maybe. We'll have to check. Like I said, I really liked that first issue of whatever the heck that book was named. Dark Spaces Wildfire. It's in the back of this. That was some good stuff. Oh, and here's something I wanted to bring up that struck me during... I know Paulo saw this. Giddy Tim getting those. Tim, who's been on here before, Howler Mouse. He made a big score. He drives a lot for his job. He's a social worker, and sometimes he's got to drive 4-6 hours to places for whatever reason. And so he actually stopped. If you go to Howler Mouse's channel, you can see his haul or his Instagram, or I think he had one other place. I can't remember where. But he stopped at an antique shop that he goes to regularly that has comics, and he got Watchmen 1-8 for $1. He got Sandman 1-10 or something, or various issues. He got number 1, that's for sure, for $1. It was just like, and he was so giddy showing up. I've never seen Tim so giddy before. I mean, he was just like, "Woo! Look what I got for $1."
It's something getting something at a great price, and, you know.
But he also was showing off. I guess it was this. He was just showing off. I don't think it was the same trip, but a Astro City collected edition. Okay. And what struck me between Tim and the comments is Brent Anderson never gets mentioned when people talk about Astro City. And I was just like, of course, as Kurt Busiek gets mentioned everybody loves Astro City. People always mention the Alex Ross covers, and even that Alex Ross designed a lot of the characters. But Brent Anderson's been drawing that book for like 30 years. And doing a terrific job at it. Like, no one ever mentions him when they're talking about Astro City. And I was like, I wonder why that is.
You know, that's a Brent Anderson problem. Nobody ever mentions Brent Anderson as one of the greatest artists.
No one mentions him at all, and he's been
which is kind of funny. You know, I remember when I was a kid. Kazar was a backup in Spider-Man in the Brazilian editions.
Oh, I was buying in the early 80s, and when I was in high school, I was buying that off of the stands and loved it.
And I remember those Brent Anderson fill-ins in X-Men, even before God Loves Man Kills came out. And they were pretty good. I mean, I thought he was better than Cockrum. Because Byrne quit, and then Cockrum was coming back, but I think Brent Anderson he had a great style, but for some reason, he just doesn't excite the majority of
God
readers.
Loves Man Kills, he did?
Yeah.
He never gets mentioned on that. It's like everyone mentions that. No one mentions Brent Anderson. And like Astro City has been a book that's been, when did that come out? Like 92?
95.
1995.
So it has been around a freaking long time, and no one ever praises Brent Anderson. It's just kind of crazy. And I didn't realize that until I was watching Tim's video and he was talking about it. And, they mentioned, he and some of the commenters mentioned Alex Ross and mentioned Kurt Busiek, and Brent Anderson didn't. It was just like, and it's not even like Astro City is one of those books that has like 20 artists on it. It's not like it has Kurt Busiek and 20 different artists over the years.
Right.
It's had Kurt Busiek and Brent Anderson. It's kind of crazy. Yeah, he hasn't left a mark. I guess he's overshadowed by Ross representing I think he is. And he's overshadowed by Kurt Busiek.
Yeah, he had 20 years career before he started, 20 years before he started working on Astro City, and people don't remember about that he drew God Loves Man Kills and about his Kazar work. And every once in a, which is kind of funny because every once in a while, it always comes up to my mind. I need to read the complete Somerset Holmes.
Yeah. I have that. I reread it a couple of years ago. It's a fun series.
I never read it fully.
Yeah,
but and it's more Brent Anderson than Bruce Jones to me.
Yeah, I think Anderson's work lends itself to being invisible. Yeah, he's not really flashy, but he's a good storyteller. He's got a good drawing style, but his stuff's not pretty either. It doesn't have. I don't know how to describe you. It doesn't fall into any genre. It's sort of Neil Adams-ish. That would be the only genre I can put it in.
Mm-hmm. But you know what? So is Steve Epting. I think that's his style and Steve Epting's style have a lot in common.
But I think Steve Epting's style can be computer colored in such a way that you can really computer color Steve Epting's style in sort of a modern, roundish way that fits in with everything. I think Brent Anderson has a little more graphic design flatness in his style. Not that he's Mike Mignola-ish or anything like that, but I think he's got a little more of that, which maybe doesn't, because Adam's toned way down. Yeah.
I think you have also that there's something to be said about an artist who consistently is working and getting the work done. I think Paul Ryan fell into that, where he always got work no matter what, because he always got the work in on time, kind of a thing.
But I liked Paul Ryan, and being a fan of the Phantom, when he took over the Daily Strip, and I saw that was the best Paul Ryan ever, and that was also the best Phantom ever.
But he's not overshadowed by Alex Ross doing covers, and again, I don't know what the house ads look like. Is his name on the books and all the advertisements?
Well, it's always Kurt Busiek's Astro City, and they usually use the painted Alex Ross artwork.
Yeah, they don't even have names on the hardcovers, and I'm trying to figure out if I flipped it open and I'm like, all of a sudden I see other artists. Oh no, this is the same books. Where is the actual page? Yeah, Kurt Busiek writing, Brent Eric Anderson artist, Alex Sinclair, Wendy. Yeah, this name's right there.
Sure,
right.
But
it's not on the cover. The 7th award-winning volume. Like, it's an award-winning volume. People love.
And people, for some reason, will never think of Brent Anderson as that artist.
No, they don't even think of him as the. I don't think they think of it. They don't even think of him as the Astro City. I don't. It's like I said, people don't even mention him when they mention Astro City.
Well, he won Harvey Awards and Eisner Awards, and I'm going to assume they're going to be for Astro City, considering the years he won those. 1996 and 1997 was the Harvey Awards, and then in 1996 drew 1998 Eisner Awards.
Yeah, it's not some small little indie project. It's big. Everybody knows that. I just didn't realize that till that Tim video, and he was talking about it. I'm like, I never hear his name ever. No one ever says Brent Anderson. Matter of fact, I had to stop and remember what his name was, even though I know, to make sure I was saying his name just before. I was like, am I saying the right guy's name? Even though I knew I was. Because no one ever says Brent Anderson. It's like he's, what is that person's name you say in the mirror 3 times and they appear?
Beetlejuice.
What was that?
Bloody Mary.
Bloody Mary.
And it's like Candyman is the other one.
Candyman. It's like no one says Brent Anderson's name because he'll appear. Like, what?
Also, you'll notice that it's marketed as Kurt Busiek's Astro City, the copyright belongs to Jukebox Productions, and I always wonder who exactly owns Jukebox Productions. Is it just Kurt? Is it Kurt and Alex Ross? Is it Busiek, Ross, and Anderson on equal shares?
Good question.
Does Busiek have 50%? Busiek have 50% in the other, and the artists get a different percentage type.
Yeah, and there's Giddy Tim. I'm the only one that mentions Anderson when Astro City is talked about. I don't think you actually mentioned him last time. That's when I know. Maybe because you didn't mention him, I noticed you not. But your video, your last video, your Giddy Tim showing all your new good comics, all your dollar treasure finds, where you had Astro City, and I think you were talking to someone about Alex Ross too in the comments. Uh-oh. I did mention Howler Mouse 3 times. That is correct. But yeah, he really is a forgotten star. It's kind of crazy. Like I said, and it hasn't been a short time he's been on that book. Another of last week's book I got this week is 8 Billion Genies, number 3. This has been fun. I think it's been optioned for a Netflix thing.
I can see that. I've been seeing like it popping up on various TikToks about people talking about it.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's Charles Soule and Ryan Brown. Let's see who does the rest of it. Letters by Chris Crank. Art, colors, design, and cover by Ryan Brown. And color assists by Kevin Nipstein. Knipstein. I've never seen that name before. Nipstein.
I think I came up with the only thing that with the best wish for the genies, in a way that essentially renders all of the 8 billion the work of 8 billion genies useless. I wish for every wish made to you genies to fail from now until the end of time.
Now would your own wish fail as well?
The genies can grant or not grant the wishes. So there's even like,
really?
Like, if you make a wish that affects the world in too bad a way, we just won't grant it. Like when the president of the United States, I think in issue 1, tried to make the U.S. the strongest nation ever possible, blah, blah. The genies were like, yeah, we got that from about 32 different countries. We're not granting those.
Are they saying it exactly like that? Because I kind of like that kind of mood. That mood.
Well, they kind of are.
Nah, I don't think so.
We're not doing that.
It's like, nah, that's stupid. That's too stupid of a wish. Try something else.
Like in this issue, we find out what remnants are, because at the end of last issue, Hemingway, Dorothy Parker, and Jim Morrison show up at the bar door looking for drinks. And it turns out they were part of someone else's wish. Mm-hmm. And then it was kind of over. So they hang around for a while until the person like dies or their wish is over or something. And then they just disappear. They go splat. So we're hanging out with Hemingway, Dorothy Parker, and Jim Morrison for a little while on this until they went splat. And then there was one guy who wished he could get across town safely. So we have this big suit of armor on. And he's going across town. And some giant vampire jumped out to try and fight him. So it's a fun, but it's just fun.
Right.
It really is an exercise in trying to think up how many crazy wishes you can. Found out today, Paper Girls show on Amazon Prime starts on the 29th. Wow. Cool. I sold my Paper Girl issues, except for the last. It was funny. It was during I needed the room and people were interested in them. And I was like, I'm not going to read these again. I enjoyed them. I'm not going to read them again. And there was like a 6-month or a year gap between 28 issues of the series and the last 6. So I sold like the 28 issues of the series on eBay one day I got back. If you can get back like cover price for a bunch of books, you're doing well these days, which is around what I got back. I think I did maybe even done a little better, but then I felt it was still my pull list, so I got the last 6 issues. And now it's like I got the last 6 issues. Wonder who wants these.
Right. I've never read the series. I know nothing about it.
It's fun. I love Genies, but if it goes in the direction of the end of the recent issue, I'm going to have to stop buying it. I like it because it's not a superhero book, and now they're superheroes. Yeah, I think it'll surprise us still. But some people at the end of this one, we get some superheroes show up because guys who wanted to protect the world decided they wanted to wish to be superheroes. I'm sure they're showing up at the end of issue 3. They might be dead by the end of issue 4. Just like Hemingway, Dorothy Parker, and Jim Morrison were. I kept number 1. The book just annoyed me. I could see how it might annoy some people, because it really is an exercise in cleverness. And if you're not into that sort of cleverness can be annoying. So if you're not into it, I can see how that might be annoying. But I'm into it. I'm enjoying the cleverness. But there have been times where I've been annoyed by cleverness. I guess it all depends on how successful they are at being clever. In my mind, at least. 8 billion genies.
The book that I ordered from Amazon that I recently got, I haven't got to read it thoroughly yet, is Lettering Comics.
Oh, okay.
The Essential Guide to Lettering Comics. And yes, I have lettered comics for the last 10, 15 years. There's still things to learn. And, I figured I've used Nate's fonts in the past, and I figured, why not see what he has in his book? And I've learned a few things already. There's always the little tricks here and there, and it's like, hey, and sometimes you'll get stuck on something and have to go looking for information. It's like, I think they explain it a little better than like the Comic Craft book that came out a few years back.
Interesting.
So I thought that was a pretty cool thing. And, again, it's one of those things. It's like, yeah, there's always something new to learn. So I recommend it so far.
Okay, I'll have to check that one out. I haven't seen that one. Tim was talking about Paper Girls, not 8 Billion Genies. Okay, I can see why that one be my criticism. Well, once again, I have to talking about tamping down my expectations. Sometimes my criticism of Paper Girls was I found it sometimes trying too hard to be hip. But that could just be me being annoyed at hip, so I kind of tamped that down as I read that, and I can see coming away with me thinking, oh my goodness, this is just too annoying, because it was about the 1980s, about these paper girls. They were spunky, but it had just enough weird things in it that overcame my my disdain of the sort of hipness of it. Mm-hmm. Like I said, sometimes when you read a comic, sometimes when I read a comic, it's me, not the comic. Sometimes it's that it costs an extra $1 that can color your whole compared to my other comics. I picked up some Marvel comic this week. What was it? If I pick it up, I mean, I didn't buy it. I literally lifted it from the shelf. The Mandalorian #1, which I think came out a couple weeks ago. The Mandalorian TV show was the first Star Wars thing I watched since the original Star Wars trilogy. I didn't watch any. I'm just not that big a Star Wars fan. I didn't watch any of the other stuff. But I started watching the Mandalorian TV show, and I've enjoyed it. Okay. So I was like, let me give a look to the Mandalorian comic just for the heck of it. The price on it was like $5.99. I barely opened it. I was like, no thanks.
What made you pick up that book? Was it the title or was it the art?
It was just that I wanted to see the art and how they were handling a Mandalorian comic.
Okay.
The art made... I can't even tell you my impression of the art because it made no impression. And then the price just wiped it out of my mind. It was kind of like, $6? I don't want to try something new, especially from Marvel, for $6. They should not be the top of the market when it comes to price. But they are. So I try other stuff. Like here's something I tried this week that once again was $4, which is not cheap. New Think 2.0. And I thought that meant, I don't know, volume 2 of New Think. the glare from the lights is, I'm trying to get it off, and they built glare into the logo. I'm like,
oh, okay.
There's a fool's errand.
Uh-huh. Yeah, let's cover up the logo so we can't really see what it says.
It's like, don't they know that lens flare has been out for decades?
Hey, it was the first Photoshop effect. Everybody used it.
That's because the editors thought it was cool.
Yes.
So colorists, not being dumb, freelance colorists, put lens flares wherever they could.
I
And
know I did.
And if the editor wanted another lens flare, they got another lens flare. We used to make fun of them in the bullpen all the time. But I had no idea what this is. I flipped through it and liked the art. It's got this sort of fairy tale style. And I thought it was the first issue, but it's not. It's actually the second issue, which is, I guess, is what the 2.0 name, because the name of the book is New Think. And I finally found the indicia and found out it's the second issue. But I think this must be a done in one series, because this was a done in one story. And it was almost like a fairy tale story. It was about a woman in, I guess, medieval times, or sometime that's not now, when people lived in towns and wooden houses, and she was a storyteller. And she went around, being a storyteller, but there was one guy in all the land who didn't like stories and storytellers, and that was the king.
So everybody's a critic. It's always that one guy.
So he in the middle of the night puts a curse on her house that turns all her walls to glass. And no one in town can survive that much scrutiny. It said that was like the warning to storytellers. And they eventually rally around her, bloody, 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 and there's a happy ending. But I'm still. Oh, hold on a second. I think New Think, a 5-issue series. That's all it says. And the next issue has Marilyn. So I think it must all be done in ones. We've got, looks like digital Marilyn Monroe next issue. But I enjoyed this issue.
So it's an ongoing title, but the stories themselves are different.
Well, it's a 5-issue mini, but as far as I can tell, there is no other part to this story.
Okay.
It's a done in one. And from the cover of the next issue, which gives us digital Marilyn Monroe, I got to figure that's a different time and place.
Mm.
And there's no, and Axel Alonso is the editor-in-chief of AWA Life. It seems there's his little editorial, but it gives me no hint what this book is. There's no letters page. There's no note from anybody to tell me what this is. So that's a little weird.
Mm.
But it was a good issue. What's coming out from AWA Upshot anyway? We've got Devil's Highway, The Joneses, Hit Me, and Absolution. They all look like it looks like they're all 5-issue series. So there's some more AWA stuff.
No, it looks like nice art.
Yeah, the covers are nice. This cover is nice too. I dropped my comic bag.
It's no longer mint.
But it was a solid pickup on a week where I only had 3 comics because 4 were missing. All right, who wants to do a read, rip, and slab?
Let's do it.
Let's see what we got. Let me. All right, we're going to go with November 1967 DC Comics. Come on, share screen. There we go. November 1967 DC comic. We got Aquaman. We got Superboy. We got Green Lantern. I might have that Aquaman. I'm not sure.
You know that the French edition that used that Aquaman cover, because you can't, if the French Comics Code did not allow men to hold a woman like that, they replaced it with a dolphin.
What kind of crazy rule was that? I thought the French were
no.
all sorts
The
of.
story with the whole story with it.
No, it was just a cover.
Wow.
No, the French Comics Code was an unholy alliance between the Catholic Church and the French Communist Party.
Ah, okay.
Oh.
Which is funny because the communists and the Catholics hate each other.
Yeah, communists are atheists by philosophy. I'm sure the Catholic Church doesn't appreciate that.
The thing is, the Catholic Church did not want that newfangled American rock and roll and women in bikinis to contaminate the mind of young French children. And the French Communist Party did not want American rock and roll and women in bikinis to contaminate the mind of young French children.
Tim is going to read Aquaman, of course, because it's the most lascivious cover now we can see. Slav Green Lantern and Rip Superboy. It's going to Slav Aquaman, read Green Lantern, and Rip Superboy. So that's 2 Rip Superboys.
I'm going to slap Green Lantern, read Superboy, and rip Aquaman.
3 Rip Superboys. Wow.
No, I'm going to read Superboy.
You're going to read Superboy.
Read Superboy and rip Aquaman.
You're a first person not ripping Superboy. I think that's a Nick Cardy cover on Aquaman.
I think so as well.
What? I think I'm gonna have to slab the rip. All of a sudden, Nick Cardy cover. All of a sudden, I can't talk. What do I want to read? Superboy or Green Lantern?
That's where I'm.
What's happening to me? Who am I? What am I? Those are the Green Lanterns. Green Lantern 585. That's the wrong number. That must be 58. Must be a typo.
Yeah, I think that's 58. Yeah. I think I'm going to read Superboy, slab Green Lantern, and rip Aquaman. I think that would be my.
I think I'm also going to read Superboy, which means I'm going to have to rip up Green Lantern. And is that a Gil Kane cover?
That looks like a Gil Kane cover.
So who would be doing Superboy at that time?
Was Kirk Swan doing Superboy?
He was, but is that a Kirk Swan cover?
I don't know. Because usually a Kirk Swan cover is just him flying up. So
Superboy's stolen identity.
Ted Goblin says 4th category in read slab rip is put dolphin on cover.
Or read this issue in France. Walk around just reading it.
Which cover would you replace the main figure with a dolphin? See, I would replace Aquaman's the easy. I mean, pardon me. Green Lantern here is the easy one. We replace him with a dolphin. What's happening to me? What am I? We'd probably have to make the negative dolphin behind him. So he'd be turning into Dolphin Green Lantern.
Kurt Swan and George Klein.
Swan, not quite Swanderson. Swander Klein. Okay.
And the inside book is penciled by George Pep.
George who?
Hold on, this thing moved on me.
So it's even more boring than usual?
Pap. P-A-P-P.
George Pap. Okay. I know that name now.
So it's probably more boring than usual.
Nick Cardy did a lot of nice covers.
Yeah. I always wondered if Nick Cardy would ever have been good enough, but then again, to work at Marvel. But then again, Stan Lee was pretty particular who he wanted working at Marvel at the time.
Yeah, you had to be able to do his writing for him.
I'm going to step away for a second, so
Okay.
I'll be back in a minute.
But do you like that Aquaman cover with Mara or with a dolphin?
He did some terrific covers on Aquaman and Teen Titans. He was one of DC's best cover artists in the 60s.
Let
No
me see
matter
if I
how
can.
many dolphins they
I'm not sure I can locate that cover. The French comics didn't exactly come out with a similar numbering, or in the same title. But let me see what I can do here.
Let's see what he can find. Yeah, there's a Nick Cardy cover. My friend Ed showed it to me. I bought it in the 90s just for the cover. It was like a Teen Titans, I don't know, 28 or something. It was somewhere in my collection. But it was just this, I think Robin Must Die. I remember it had a Dutch angle with maybe a Robin at a tombstone. All this wavy stuff on it. That was a good Nick Cardy cover. He did a lot of nice covers. He and Neil Adams were the two best cover artists of late 60s DC. And Cardy doesn't get nearly as much love as Adams, but Adams was way more revolutionary. So, but Nick still did a good job. How does one go looking up the French?
I'm at comicbd.fr. So I think I found the images for Aquaman #1 from. I don't even know the publisher.
Sleepy Readers just echoing me. Cardy was probably their second best cover artist after Adams. Yes, definitely. They were their top two, I would say. But Neil Adams, of course, being a legend, so it's tough to beat him out in that cover contest. What does he have here?
Very dramatic.
Oh man, in Gone Fishing. Oh, that is crazy. Don't want that American rock and roll influence. Definitely.
All that rock and roll making you rescue women by carrying them in your arms.
Yeah.
Better do it with the dolphin instead.
That is kind of funny. Holding up. I wonder if people at the time knew that. What year did that? No.
They wouldn't know.
I was wondering, would that have come out in the 60s or much later?
Yeah, 1970.
1970. Yeah, not much later. So there was no. I don't think there'd be any way to find out really.
That comic also has one Lois Lane story and 2 science fiction stories.
Yeah, we'll have to show that to Wilson when he gets back. Keep it handy. Good stuff. What? 8 billion genies. That's the best thing ever. My fish wife. Won't someone help her? Dolphins aren't fish, Aquaman. There's some solid cover copy. No one ever the editors often didn't like coming up with cover copy in the 90s. Early 90s especially, because cover copy was just kind of falling out of favor and wasn't cool anymore, but they still had to have cover copy on the covers. It was like a requirement. So it was kind of, it was always like pulling teeth at each
for the newsstand. If you don't have cover copy, it's one less thing calling out attention.
Yeah. So there was, I don't know when that rule went away that there should be, because it used to be if they had some cover they really liked that they didn't want to get cover copy on, they'd have to get special dispensation to not have cover copy on it. Though I imagine the letterers, at least the freelance, most of the cover copy lettering was done in-house.
Yeah.
But Richard Starkings also did cover copy, like for the X books and things. So he was getting paid freelance for cover copy. So I imagine he didn't want cover copy to go out of style because he was making money on it.
Sure. I really don't know. Was Richard Starkings on staff at Marvel UK before he became a full-time letterer?
I don't know. I always knew him to be in California.
But he was British. He worked at Marvel UK.
Yeah.
He was even a writer. He wrote new scripts for Marvel UK.
Okay. You want to show Wilson that cover?
Yeah.
He dug up that Aquaman cover.
Oh yeah?
It's good stuff. Here we go.
Oh, it's seamless. It was like it was naturally always there.
And put Tit Goblin's cover copy on it, and we're all set. My fish wife, won't someone help her? Dolphins aren't fish, Aquaman.
I actually want to see the two covers side by side. I'm going to send you the link to the direct link to this.
Okay.
Here in the private chat, and see if you can try to put the two side by side.
Let's see. That means I have to go to private chat, get the link. Oh my God, that's awful. Did they redraw his face?
It's possible. There were requirements that you had to have some work done locally by French people, and redrawing the covers, even if they were identical, was the quickest route.
Okay, let me see what I can do here. Now, where is mine with that in it? Bum, bum, bum. It's exciting watching me work on Photoshop when you can't see,
We can't see what's going on.
Can't see a darn thing.
The secrets of production.
Well, you can share the screen for Photoshop, and we'd see it.
I'm trying to get it done faster than that. Okay, there's our Aquaman cover from there. Let me paste it into here. Image, canvas size. We're going to make this canvas size double the width.
So the comic books that you were collecting, Pablo, as a kid, were they also the same size as our comic books, or were they bigger magazine size?
No, the Brazilian comics were digest size.
Digest size, okay.
About 4 inches, about 4 by 6 by 4 inches.
And they had how many stories in one then?
3 or 4. They would have to cut out pages sometimes to do 4 stories, and if they managed to do 2 stories of one character, it would actually be easier because they would just take out the recap pages.
Were they black and white or in color?
In color, but they were recolored in house.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, well, one of the things that Marvel and DC did at the time was they would ship out the printing art in black and white because they wouldn't know if the licensor could print in color or not.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because I'm always curious about comics around the world.
That's what those black and white stats were for.
Yeah.
You know, in this week's for Color Fossils, I introduced the guys to Jerry Siegel's work at Disney Italy. They had no idea that Jerry Siegel wrote 157 stories for Arnaldo Mondadori between 1972 and 1979.
Side by side comparison. And no, I don't think they redrew his face. That's just not a very good Nick Cardy face on Aquaman, because he's trying to make him look anguished, and he looks kind of goofy.
And I didn't notice until I saw the Dolphin cover that his sidekick is also in the back.
Oh, yeah.
He is?
On the ground, yeah.
Oh, yeah, look at that. Coming up out of the... I guess you can have a man in that position. That's not...
oh, he's not holding him.
Too lascivious. That is funny. They replaced her with a fish.
I hear that's what they're doing in the new movie. She's going to put a dolphin in her place. That's amazing. You know, I've seen covers changes where it's like, oh, instead of having him as Peter Parker, he'll be Spider-Man on the covers. Like the Marvel Tales were like that. But to change a character entirely to a different species, that in itself is just something.
It's an 8 billion genies crossover. Aquaman's secret wish comes true. Do cover artists get royalties on books? No.
No.
Like with the cover artist on Death of Superman get some of the pie? No. What if the cover changes drastically after the art, like the dolphin one? Nope. Cover artists get no royalties whatsoever.
Once you got paid for that first job, you're pretty much done.
Yeah, even if you are entitled to royalties in the U.S. market for based on your sales performance, once those things get licensed to a foreign licensor, you get zero.
Yeah, you can get what they called incentives back in the day. I think your book had to sell a certain amount, and you would receive some money. And then it also depends where you are on the totem pole. When I was coloring, I would not get anything from the trade paperback. Now colorist gets a little something, and it's like I just missed it. And it was like, there's a Wolverine trade paperback I could have made some money on. There's a Thor trade paperback. You know, at this point, I would be just happy if they gave me a copy of the book.
Right.
You know, at least give me a copy of the Thor's issues that I worked on.
Marvel does not do that.
Does not at all.
Does that mean something smells fishy? That means she smells fishy. I don't know if she smells fishy, but something is certainly fishy about that cover. No doubt. The color on the dolphin color is fantastic for the Dayglow covers. Yeah. I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah, you should have said that she smells dolphiny.
Yeah. She smells mammally. Because, as the cover copy said, dolphins aren't fish, graphic man. As the new revised cover copy says.
I do miss copy on covers, though.
Yeah,
fun,
we were talking
like
about
the
that.
Superman book.
We were talking about that. And I don't know what years it was in Marvel. Probably somewhere around the early to mid 90s, when cover copy was still necessitated by whoever sets that policy, but the editors didn't really want to write it. So there was like a time like cover copy stopped being cool. So it was like they'd always be like, I got to come up with something for this cover. There'd always be a resignation when they had to come up with some cover copy for something, and they had to get like special dispensation on a cover that they didn't want cover copy for. Did you ever notice that? Did you ever?
I never really noticed it. I that wasn't one of the things that I heard about.
Okay.
Now, when I was one of the people that they ran covers with,
right?
So I had to sign off on it. And by running covers, I don't know if you had explained it before to people, is that every cover, there's certain things on the cover that needs to be on there, and each department kind of had to sign off on it. So a cover would be run to me. I'm usually the last person on the totem pole because I would send the artwork out to the Comics Code.
Right.
So it's like, that's how I end up reading the books at least 3 or 4 times before I got the physical copy of the books. So, but I never heard anything about what was wanted on the cover or anything like that, as far as text and things like that were concerned.
That it was really just editors coming out of their office bemoaning stuff. Occasionally, some intern would be happy because they came up with the cover copy.
Oh, okay.
Because they'd be like, "Yeah, you want to come up with a cover copy? Go right ahead. see what you can come up with."
Sometimes those are the fun things because sometimes things will pop out like, "Does anyone want to write the letters pages or design the letters pages and things like that?" And I'm almost sure I wrote a letter because they needed a letter for one of the X-Men books.
I have heard of that, but heard that happening.
So I'm almost. I remember writing one. I don't know if it ever got printed. That's what it was.
What would you guys say is the most famous cover change, if any? Marvel swapping heads in the 70s. That Steranko Hulk cover.
Yeah, but they did that a lot to Kirby on Superman too.
Yeah, those are in the interiors mode. But I would say because it's like the 70s are filled with covers where John Romita redrew somebody's head.
Stan Lee shooting down Neil Adams' original idea for that Avengers cover, where he wanted to have the Vision coming up and saying, "3 cows shot me down."
That's not really an artistic change, but I know what you mean. That one does sound. He finally got to use that in the collected. He tells that story in the collected edition that came out like in the late 90s.
I would say the most famous cover change, if people even know about this, story, anecdotal. I don't know if it's true, but from what I understand, Mark Grunwald had a cover. I believe it was Thor issue. Jim Shooter did not like it. Told him to change it, and Mark didn't change it, and printed it as it was. I think it was a Simonson cover. Printed it as it was, and then the story goes, as the legend goes, Jim was like, "See, isn't this better?"
Yeah.
And Mark never changed a thing on it.
I have heard that story in many forms. With many things, and I think it's probably actually happened more than once to different people where they ask for a change and you go, "Oh, here it is. Oh, much better, much better." That's like the creative life a lot of times,
right?
But I think, like I said, the most famous, because there was lots of look at any comic from the 70s and you can spot the Romita heads, but the Marie Severin head over the Jim Steranko head on that Hulk annual where he's holding up the logo is probably that's the one everybody knows about. Yeah, I assume cover artists do very well in the original art market. Yeah, they do. That's one of the ways you can make a lot, especially as original art prices have shot up.
They've been something. It's amazing and crazy how the prices are, and I do wonder if that just what it is now, or it's because more people are going digital and not many cover art available. It's wild, and the older stuff is going even crazier.
Art Adams can make a lot of money from drawing and redrawing covers. I know. I've heard about that story about famous sci-fi prose editors. Yeah, that's a story that gets around. It may be apocryphal, but I'm pretty sure it's actually happened sometimes. And I'm pretty sure I've done that to people. Here, major change. You put one more blade of grass on and you give it back to them. They're like, "Okay, that's good." To say you made a change. Like that's just part of having non-creative people in charge of creative people.
Yep.
Not that Shooter was particularly non-creative, but I think it also comes with the territory, especially of editor-in-chief. I noticed that happened with Bob Harris. Because the first editor-in-chief who was there with me was Tom DeFalco, right? Was he there first? Yeah. Because I think it went from Shooter to DeFalco, but I wasn't there during Shooter.
Right. So yeah, DeFalco was there when I came in,
and I noticed people would always complain about DeFalco in that he could become whimsical. Same thing you were just saying. I don't like this there's something wrong with Captain America's mask in this. Fix it, and then fix it and give it back, and whatever. And I always just kind of thought, oh, that's just must be what kind of guy he is. And Bob Harris, before he got the editor-in-chief, I always thought he was in charge of the X-Men, made pretty reasonable decisions. If I would see him doing he seemed to be one of the more reasonable guys. But when he got to be editor-in-chief, he got to be more whimsical. And by whimsical, I mean making decisions based on almost nothing. Kind of like, nah, I don't like that, go with that one. Nah, no, and I think that comes with where before, when you're like, Bob was in charge of the X-Men, which was actually a pretty sweet gig, because that was everybody wanted to draw the X-Men because it paid the most royalties, so he could pick whoever he wanted and use reason. When all of a sudden you go from that to being in charge of the whole Marvel line, even the bad bottom corner of the books, and you find yourself having to make decisions about these failures of books, you're going to be whimsical about it. You can't put as much thought into what to do with the bottom 10% of books as you do with the top 10%. Because that bottom 10% is going to be gone in 6 months or however long it takes to cancel them. So I noticed he became, and then people started complaining that Bob was being much more whimsical, making these crazy decisions. And I was like, you know what? I don't think it's the person. I think it comes with the position. Where all of a sudden you got to make these decisions on bad selling books, and you really want to put your time, that amount of time and reason into them? I don't know.
Yeah,
I wish I could see Marie Javins doing it now. Really, no. She's always been a reasonable person, but I wonder if she's got more whimsical since she became DC's editor-in-chief.
Yeah, I don't know. I never thought of it that way. One of the things I do recall about Bob was that he would be able to leave. At one point, he was able to leave his office, go to another office, and walk back. When he became editor-in-chief, he would get out of his office, and then he would be stopped every 4 feet because someone had a question for him and stuff like that. So that's just a huge difference of just walking from your office to go to the bathroom.
All of a sudden, you got to make those decisions up and down the line,
right on the spot.
What are you going to base it on? What are you going to base those decisions on besides your whim at that moment?
Right.
Do you like the one with do you like Wolverine being taller or shorter on this cover? Shorter. Okay, we're going with shorter. I mean, there's no time for reasons. Like I said, I think it's the position. It wasn't him. Tom DeFalco was never whimsical. He just had to make these whimsical decisions, just like Bob Harris had to. Brian Boland, king of covers, but he's got no covers to sell. He's been all digital since 1998. Imagine that. Every Brian Boland cover since 1998 only exists as bites and bits. In charge of too much, yeah. But it's not just in charge of too. It's you can go from concentrating on your area. And like Bob's area was the X-Men. That was very successful. It was a lot easier to be the editor of the X-Men than the editor of these random 4 other Marvel titles that don't sell very well. Because especially in those days, Marvel, there was royalties to be made, and you could make twice as much drawing the X-Men as drawing the Avengers.
Mm-hmm.
So you wanted to draw, all the best talent wanted to draw the X-Men. Why not?
Either X-Men or Spider-Man, and then the Hulk, Ghost Rider, and Punisher.
Yeah. Those were the good ones to edit, because
even the low-selling X-Men books, the incentives were good.
Although you'd think it would be easier to get at least a fill-in in the Punisher, because it wasn't normal to have that much of an ongoing art team.
Yeah.
Well, the Punisher and Villains, the thing is that, from what I understand, they had a lot of fill-ins.
Oh, that's right.
Because the editor, if you came in and asked for a story, the editor will give you a story. And
Don Daly had a lot of work in drawers.
Yeah, so there was closets full of artwork sitting there that you didn't have to actually order a new new Punisher story for years, because that's how much backstories they had.
Yeah, you don't really need to worry about continuity. In this story, the Punisher shoots a drug dealer.
That Jim Lee jet ski cover is still one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
You just loaned the Punisher your jet ski. Kiss that jet ski goodbye, or something like that. See, that's one where the cover copy made the cover.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't really get that anymore.
No,
because
not at all.
It has nothing to. Well, it has to do with the story, but it shouldn't be something that draws you in. Just the fact that it's unexpected.
Yeah, it gets you to look at it and notice the comic.
As you went, I wonder what the Punisher is going to do with that jet ski.
I wonder what Aquaman's going to do with that dolphin. You can't seem to save it. Why doesn't he throw the dolphin back in the water? It would seem that keeping him up in the air is the wrong idea.
Plus, he's also holding that dolphin like if it was a laser gun he used to shoot people with.
That is exactly where Rob Liefeld got his idea for those big guns, is that dolphin cover. You just loaned Aquaman your dolphin. Kiss that dolphin goodbye. Oh, and another cover change that is famous only in my circles is when Ed Murr worked at Topps Comics. And he was kind of the designer, production guy, jack of all trades, art corrector. Whatever Renee Witterstatter had him doing, he was doing. Maybe it wasn't her. I don't think, maybe she wasn't. I know we worked with her a lot, but I can't remember if she was the editor of this book. But he came home one day and he was like, you know what they had me doing today? I was like, what? He's like, they had me art correcting Walt Simonson dinosaur heads.
Did anyone tell them?
They were perfectly good dinosaur heads. There were no reason for them to be art corrected, but they had me art correcting them.
So he did what? He drew an extra tooth?
I don't know. I don't even know what he did. But he was just like, that was one of the, he's like, that was one of the stupidest things. Like,
should anyone tell certain editors that the only person in comics who knows how to draw a proper dinosaur is probably Walt Simonson?
His signature is a dinosaur.
Yeah, it's just, he has more training on dinosaurs than any other comic book person out there, and probably any other dinosaur expert.
I mean, he actually knows the species of dinosaurs he's drawing.
Yeah, it was kind of nuts.
The other ones probably have the story. I was about to be eaten by a brontosaurus. Brontosaurus were vegetarians. Or a T-Rex hunts down a brontosaurus, and Walt would say something like, "Well, a T-Rex can't hunt a brontosaurus because the brontosaurus existed in the early Jurassic, and the T-Rex existed in the late Cretaceous."
There was that's the most famous art correction in among my friends. Nobody else knows about it, though we have told Walter. He was like, "Yeah, whatever. I never noticed." But I know anytime I ever had to do a correction on a cover, which was minor because I was the production guy, I always made sure to do it on that removable tape paper.
Yep.
Just so they could easily pull it up.
That's one of the best inventions, I think. Because, again, it's one of those things where it's like, you don't... Because who was the artist going to call up and yell at? The person that returned the artwork to them. not the editor, not the production people. It was the person that sent them the artwork. So there were some times where I just took it right off of it.
I question Walt's Dinos. Didn't look like the ones of the land. Didn't look like the ones on Land of the Lost, like they remembered when they were kids. I guess so. I guess Walt's Dinos didn't look. Yeah, the editors were remembering the dinosaurs in the Land of the Lost. And they're like, no, it doesn't look like Dino from the Flintstones. That's what a dinosaur looks like. Huh. Bum, bum, bum.
Now that I think of it, now I'm thinking about dinosaurs, and I wonder if the T-Rex ever interacted with the Triceratops.
No, they didn't. I've read that. Mm-hmm. I don't know that, but I've read many a times. They always put these two together, and they existed 100 million years ago.
No. The Triceratops is Cretaceous, but I think there's a good about 10, 15 million years between.
I don't know.
What you can't do is have a T-Rex send down a Brontosaurus or the Plodicus, because the Brontosaurus is early Jurassic, and the Plodicus is early Triassic, which is even further.
I'm pretty sure they were never near Triceratops either. I've read that.
Yeah. Although which Ceratops had lived in North America?
But I could be wrong. I'm no dinosaur expert.
No, I used to know these things. Then I forgot.
No. Like I said, I have known that about 5 different times in the past, and I think it was that they were never together. But I don't really know it this 6th time. If you were to ask Jared, who knew it that 5th time, that last time back, he could give you the answer. But I forgot.
I just
one of those things I know I've learned many times, but never stuck with me.
I wasn't one of those dinosaur kids.
Neither was I, but
Yeah, I tend to
learn dinosaur things over the years.
Closest thing for me was like if it was a Godzilla thing, then I'll know something about that. But until the Jurassic Park movies came out, I wouldn't say I had a favorite dinosaur before that.
Triceratops was always my favorite dinosaur.
Mine's as well. But only after Jurassic Park. It's like
that was mine as a kid. Mm-hmm. He had those, big armor on his forehead and stabby things. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, the Styracosaurus had more horns. It was basically the Billy Idol of Ceratops.
Okay.
Okay. but I kind of have a thing with the Protoceratops because it was just the armor and no horns, and I think it looks great like that.
I gotta have the stabby horns in front, mm-hmm. For some action, for some Triceratops stabbing action. Mm-hmm. And if you can shoot boulders out of it, all right.
And I became every time I saw there was when I found out that the what is that the one with the sail?
Chickens rule.
Yeah,
they're the comics' favorite dinosaur.
When the man was that? No, why am I forgetting the reptiles' names now?
Alligator, crocodile?
No, it was one of it was a pelicosaur. The one with the giant sail.
Oh, okay.
Because that's usually put in when they do dinosaur figures.
Right.
They put them in with the dinosaurs, but that thing isn't a dinosaur; it's a pelicosaur. It predates dinosaurs and is actually closer to mammals than it is to reptiles.
But it's very distinct, so you can make a toy out of it.
yeah. I suppose that's what people like. People liked it, but when it kind of. Man,
the age of reptiles. That's right. The age of reptiles was before the age of dinosaurs.
Pelicosauria. Dimetrodon. Thing. Why do I have to look this things up? The pelicosaurs were not direct ancestors of the mammals, but they were cousins to thecodonts and which makes them closer to mammals than to reptiles, even though they would look like lizards.
Huh.
But they add one temporal fenestra, one opening on the side of the skull, while reptiles had two. So if 300 million years ago you had one opening on the side of the skull, you were closer to a mammal, even if you looked like a lizard.
That was a long time
and
ago.
those were
They had
the
no
easiest
comic book.
ones. Those were the easiest ones to like basically put that sail on any modern lizard and be able to film it. And most of our journey through the center of the earth, all those old films had that as the real life not CGI, non-claymation dinosaurs.
Okay. Archaeologists and paleontologists, I imagine they don't really like each other because they investigate different things.
Well, archaeology days, I overheard a coworker in the field say, I only like old things. And the paleontologist on site said, what about dinosaurs? His reply was, no, that's too old. I don't like that. Too old. I was remembering Mort Todd, who worked with us at Marvel, wrote he just posted something. He wrote a nice little sort of tribute piece to Mike Hobson in the San Diego Comic-Con program.
Mm-hmm.
That just
which I hear is downloadable now.
Yeah.
Yes.
That program.
I think I downloaded it. I don't know where to, though. I have to go find. Downloaded it on one of my machines. I wonder which one. But more Todd popped into my head because I still sometimes somebody says a line that you remember forever and they don't even remember saying. Marvel, the summer of Jurassic Park, was putting out this dinosaur book. I forget the guy's name. He's like a famous dinosaur artist, and it wasn't a comic book. It was a book of his paintings of dinosaurs and facts about dinosaurs. And I remember Mort picked it up, looked at it, and went, "Summer of Jurassic Park, and Marvel's the only company that can't sell dinosaur stuff." And put it back down. He has no memory of saying that.
I have multiple copies of those trades.
Ah, okay.
I just recall. Well, now that you were saying it's like, yep. And it was called Dinosaurus or something like that.
Yeah,
weird name for it.
No, was it Dinotopia?
Not Dinotopia.
Dinotopia
Dinotopia was a children's book that was beautifully painted and illustrated.
Right. This one was Marvel's also knockoff of Dinotopia that they couldn't sell during the summer of Jurassic Park.
Decisions that were made on budget.
Yep. But that brought more Todd to mind, thinking of that Mike Hobson. Mike Hobson was Marvel's publisher in the 90s. I think back to the 80s when I wasn't there, but I never knew him that well.
I never met him. I think he was gone by the time I got there, or again, it's one of those things. He was someone on the 12th floor.
Yeah,
and exactly. I had no dealings with the 12th floor all that much.
Was it James Gurney? I have no idea. Wilson would have to pull out the books. I cannot remember who the artist was on Dino, whatever it was.
You guys working in production, you have no reason to talk to Hobson. Hobson was Shooters and then DeFalco's boss. So anything he decided would have to go through them and then through the editors to you.
He'd like to come down to the 9th floor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because a lot of times
and walk, because it's like, he knew most of the editors, and I would see him. Okay, I just never taught. I'd see him walk in the halls or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was one of those things where we would get visited by the upstairs people, but there was like two groups. One group that really liked comics and kind of wanted to see the ins and outs of it, and the other group were the ones who wanted to see the freaks on the 10th floor because we would do stuff.
As I found out decades later from Carl Potts, Hobson was very invested in the myth of the Marvel bullpen.
I've heard that as well.
And he wanted the bullpen to be a fun place. And that's why it was. You can't be a fun place without the boss wanting it to. So I think that's also why he liked to come down sometimes and walk through. And like there would be the people from the upper floors who just wanted to come down and see the crazy Marvel bullpen too. They just
Yeah, I can imagine Mike Hobson going around. The workers are not happy. I order you to be happy.
James Garney was the artist on Dinotopia, so that's not
okay. He was the Dinotopia artist, not the one Marvel used.
Right.
We don't know the name of the Marvel book. I'm gonna have to look it up later on.
From what I remember reading, Hobson was who Shooter told that we should start paying the author's royalties.
Yeah.
And he, coming from book publishing, you mean we don't?
That's a good deal. We don't.
But they didn't call it. They didn't call it royalties.
No, that would imply.
They were called incentives. That was one of the weird things that I was told. It's like, no, we don't call them royalties. You have to remember they're called incentives.
Legally, royalties are owned to authors, and Marvel was the author. The other people were just hired.
Just like returning the artwork was a gift.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. Ultimately, I imagine for the guys who sold the most comics, I don't care what you call them as long as you pay me.
Right. I can understand that, especially when they were making money.
Yeah. The series was called Dinosaur: A Celebration.
Dinosaur: A Celebration. Okay.
That's the name of the series. I'm still looking that up.
All right.
But at least I got the name of the book.
Yeah. You got the name.
That'll make it a little bit easier.
Then that should be in the Grand Comics database.
No, it's not a comic.
It isn't?
No, it's not a comic. That's why it might not be there. I'm not even sure it was comic size, was it?
No, it wasn't. It was graphic novel size. I mean, it was comic book size, but it was under the Epic imprint.
Okay.
And they were thicker. I think they were 32-page books, I want to say.
October 1992, Dimension Standard Modern Age US, publication type album, binding square bound.
Okay. I might be mixing it up in my memory with Dinotopia, which is a different size.
Yeah, Dinotopia is completely different size.
Yeah, completely different size.
Yeah. Album with the number 1, a cover by Kev Walker. And then it's a bunch of different people working on it inside because they're mostly short features. I don't know most of these people.
Yeah, like I don't even think they were Marvel people.
No, I don't think they were.
It was it was some weird, not within the regular editorial stuff. Maybe it was a special.
I think it was a project that was done already somewhere else.
Yeah,
and then brought to Marvel since it's under the Epic. This is under the Epic imprint.
Yes, yeah.
Those usually creator own.
Yeah, there's a lot of UK people here that I know. There's Jeff Senior, Graham Marks, Dan Abnett.
So it may have come from Marvel UK and then been brought to Marvel.
Probably
Marvel UK people at least.
Yeah, I don't know. Una Freaker? Who's that? There's a Lee Gibbons here.
That name sounds familiar, but probably just because of Watchmen.
Yeah.
Different artist.
Yeah. Volume 2 as it's more more UK people. There's Andrew Curry, Nicholas J. Vince, Dougie Braithwaite, Gary Leach.
Gary Leach. Wow.
But the thing is that the artwork in it wasn't bad, but it wasn't comic books. It wasn't, it was something that you would expect to get if you were looking at like dinosaurs, cards. A dinosaur is blah blah blah. So kind of boring.
It really didn't fit in at Marvel.
Yeah,
right.
Peter Liam Sharp.
And then you have what other books are out there with dinosaurs? You have the Jurassic Park books itself. You have Cadillacs and dinosaurs. You have Malibu was doing their own dinosaur stories called Bad Eggs, and that was just satire and stuff like that.
Yeah, they also had something called Dinosaurs for Hire.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Dinosaurs for Hire as well. That was their kind of Ninja Turtle-ish book. I think I have a poster on that for sale on eBay.
Here it is, issue number 3 has a Gary Leach cover. But they were all They're all
Why
painted.
did Epic end? I think Epic ended because of the implosion at Marvel, and
A little bit earlier.
Yeah.
Epic ended about. Epic, for all intents and purposes, ended in '94. A few things still came out in '95. Then they were stuck with the ending of Akira. But for all
I
intents
just remember Marcus McLuhan was the editor, and I think he was still there until he got fired in one of the Marvolutions, I believe.
Mhm.
I think that was
Yeah.
kind of the end of Epic for me, is when there was no one there to do the job anymore.
Hmm.
But I think Marvel was making too much money on their not creator-owned stuff, that they got less and less interested in the creator-owned stuff.
Mhm.
I'm talking about the money people at Marvel,
Yeah.
people above
I-
editorial.
The last attempt at doing something new that could be thought of as exciting was when they started marketing some stuff as heavy hitters.
Yeah, but that was all Marvel. That I
Mhm.
think that was when they split up into 5 different editorial groups too. There was no editor in chief.
That was in '95. By the time they did that in '95, Epic was gone.
Oh, Epic
Heavy hitters.
was Heavy Hitters?
Heavy hitters was in around 90,
Oh, that's
90,
right.
91, 92, something like
That's
that.
why when they tried to bring in some of the popular comic book artists to do Epic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that now. I was confusing it with something else with the other trader dresses. All right, well, we should call it an evening because it's getting time to quit, and I'm getting punchy.
Mhm.
That's
Paulo, I
always
don't
the
know how
time to
you
start a
feel.
new show.
All right,
right.
so everybody have a good week out there.
All right. Take care. Keep cool.
Watch out for dolphins.
Oh, yeah.
I will catch you all next week.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.